The Rise of Iceland. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 76, Avatar. Oris originally thought that after he yelled, he would make the people and warriors in the city who had been so scared to kneel by the opponent stand up, and then rushed out bravely, but in the end, except for a dozen white wolf warriors, everyone else was still kneeling. The ground shivered. God. Are you all deceived by the devil? Oris looked at the kneeling crowd incomprehensibly, and then a strong middle-aged priest behind him pulled out a bone knife on his waist and rushed out of the temple with a loud shout. All get up and rush out with me. That strong sacrificial ritual was still the captain of the White Wolf warrior. He once hunted 3 white wolves alone, and the name of bravery spread to all the tribes on the island. Purtiaya-sama, the White Wolf warrior, and the other warriors hurriedly got up when they saw that the Lord Warsong's sacrifice came. Putaya snorted and ordered everyone to take up their weapons, and then stood on the city wall to carefully observe the people who were approaching the city. Suddenly, Putaya saw the armored man holding a long stick in the middle of the battlefield on the opposite side, raising the stick in his hand. He was shocked, but he was puzzled. Before speaking, he heard the White Wolf warrior yelling, "Stand up, Putaya-sama, get down on your knees. Otherwise, the gods on the opposite side will summon the sky fire and sky thunder to kill you." Putaya heard the anger, kicked and rushed to pull the 2 people who were on the ground, and was about to say a few words impassionately to reprimand these courageous waste. Suddenly her body shook, and then she heard a series of words. Several thunderous blasts, like a thunderbolt in a clear sky. Putaya fell to the ground limply, and then felt a pain in his chest that was unbearable. It seemed that his internal organs were shattered, and then he had difficulty breathing, convulsed all over his body and lost consciousness. Before he died, his mind was still confused. What is being attacked by yourself? Is there really a thunder and lightning coming down? Not far from the high platform of the temple, Oris, the leader of Great Falls, and many priests can see clearly. Several armored men outside the city gate raised their long sticks, and then fire and white smoke burst out from one end, sending out a thunderbolt. Then Purtaya's upper body bloomed with a few blood flowers and fell to the ground. The White Wolf warrior and other warriors knelt down and crawled on the ground shivering. Putaya and the others seemed to have seen a miracle, and they seemed to have hallucinations. They were sluggish for a while and didn't know how to respond. The gods come to the world, hold the thunder and fire in their hands, kneel down to worship, and get blessings. Those who dare to resist a blasphemer will never be redeemed. This person is a blasphemer who dares to draw his sword and raises his arms. He will die without saving, and his wife and children will not be saved. The other people who were holding the rope for the monster-riding giant were still shouting, and the voice echoed in Great Falls, making Oris' face more and more white. After a while, those strange people entered Great Falls, and then stood still in the square, all looking up at the temple of Oris and other sacrifices. The tall leader riding the monster bowed his head and said a few words to the Beatak who was leading the horse. And then the Beatak pointed at Oris on the temple and shouted, "Seeing the gods descending to the earth, you wait as a priest, don't come to see you soon. Are you also a hypocritical person, a blasphemous person who wants to go to hell?" As the tone of the words became more and more intense, the armored men with the sky fire sky thunder rod raised the sharp weapon in their hands. Oris felt the tingling all over, and took a cold breath. He knew that as long as he said any hostility, if you speak or act against it, you have to die tragically on the spot. And Putaya, who was pierced by the sky thunder, is an example of the rebels. Oris was thinking about whether to swear to the death or surrender to save his life. Suddenly heard a voice behind him, and then he saw the brave and domineering priests all kneeling in one piece, and he shouted, "I'll wait to see the great and a benevolent God." Oris felt cold, and hurriedly bowed down and yelled, riding on horseback. Hader stretched out his hand to lower his face shield to reveal his white face and brown beard. He smiled slightly, and said to Hudik, who was on the same side, "Olaf said that this is a great way. I didn't expect these savages. So ignorant and ignorant. The fact that we described the musket as a heavenly thunder artifact completely lost their resistance and saved our energy. Yes. You, Hagrid, are brave means. Olaf's wisdom and everyone's efforts may soon allow us to unify Vinland. and then returned to Iceland to establish a free state. Hater, you really are the people whom God trusts can actually give birth to sons like prophets. Maybe in the future we will be remembered by future generations because of Olaf, after saving Hater, boiling royal jelly, establishing Viking raiding and other consecutive events. Hudic has seen Olaf's extraordinary qualities. He admires and likes this young man quite a bit. He is also convinced that he will establish a nation in America in the future. The possibility of territorial confession, so I love this little guy who is likely to be Hater's successor in the future, and he has not hesitated to praise in his words. Hater laughed and said, "Are you ready to marry a wife and have a daughter?" "I will marry my daughter to my good son in the future." Hater and Hudic said a few words and then hired the horse and approached the temple. He was so tall that he could even look at Orus, who was kneeling in front of the temple's high platform, on horseback. He observed that this was clearly the leader of the savage. The young man smiled slightly. Orus has also heard that there is a big white country on the opposite side of the sea, living with tall white people. www.uxiaspit.com. And there were white people on the island arresting and killing Beothuk people 100 years ago, but for him and the people in Great Falls, this is the first time I have really seen a white man from the east. Half an hour later, the Beothuks in Grand Rapids got together and knelt in the corner of the square and were guarded by the white slave spearmen. Thousands of people crowded together and knelt down obediently. Not to mention resisting. Even take a look at the guards. The 10 white slave spearmen did not dare. The temple in Great Falls was surrounded by more than 20 musketeers, making the temple even more sacred and inviolable in the eyes of the Beothuks in the temple. Hudic and Hater took off their helmets and sat under the idol. Behind them stood 4 Icelanders armed with matchlocks and 4 white slaves with spears. 7 or 8 priests such as Orus knelt in front of Hater, and Hater questioned them, and Blackstone and another newly captured Indian slave acted as an interpreter. After some inquiries, Hater had a clear understanding of Grand Rapids, and learned that although the population of this city is only over 1,000, it rules the entire northern part of Vinland and is considered to be one of the Beothuk alliances. Important members knowing the truth and falsity of Great Falls, Hater had a murderous intention on Orus. He had just learned that this young man named Orus was the leader of Grand Rapids, and he would inherit the greatest right to communicate with God in the future. It's better to kill such a person if he stays as a high priest. Orus suddenly felt cold, and then saw the tall white man in front of him pulling his face down. He was uneasy and guessed that he might kill himself, because the tribe who wins this struggle will not be left with defeat. The leader of one party, not even the whole family, is left alone. Orus, who didn't want to die, was sweating profusely. He had an idea and shouted, "God, I have something to say." Chapter 77, Control the Barbarian. Orus is only 18 years old this year. He thinks he has a great time and doesn't want to die at all, so he can at least be able to ask to speak after he perceives that the white boss may have a murderous heart. After listening to Blackstone's translation, Hater nodded for Orus to speak freely. Orus stammered out of excitement without even thinking about it. She frowned slightly, and after half a day he organized a language translation and said, "Great and merciful God, I am willing to submit to the great incarnation of thee in the name of the Lord of the city and the high priest who will take over. You are the of heaven, and you are extremely noble. How can I personally lead the people and teach the people? It should be my sacrifice to proclaim your kindness to the people of the tribes on the island and let them realize their true faith." After hearing this, Hater discussed a few words with Hudic in a low voice, and then asked, "How can you help me?" After listening to Blackstone's translation, Orus felt relieved and knew that his life was 80% covered, so he said more hard, "Great incarnation of the gods. Since you are the incarnation, I think no matter it is any god, you are in the world. The stand-in for doing things, you are the Lord of the heavens and all things, mountains, rivers, seas and rivers. You should have countless names of gods and the co-lord of thousands of tribes. My Great Falls believe in the goddess of the ocean and harvest, the great surest. I want the greatness is not the same as human beings. Gods do not have gender distinctions. It is only my narrow cognition of human beings, so I want to invite my grandfather, the great sacrifice to Adap, who is the most popular in Great Falls or even the entire league. A respectful sacrifice. If he believes in the true gods and returns to your kingdom of gods in front of everyone, then I believe it will be much easier for you to rule the people of the world." After hearing this, Hater was very happy, and looked at Orus and nodded, "You are very good. If you can do what you say, I think I will let you be a high priest, a man on Vinland Island, high priest of all Beothuk." Hater agreed with Orus, so Orus bowed his head respectfully and got up, took a priest to the temple and carried out his grandfather, The high priest Adipatap had fallen into coma due to a stroke, but apart from the worship in the temple, no one in Grand Rapids knew about it. Oris invited Hader and others to sit outside the temple, and then helped his grandfather out and kneel down. In front of Hader, the movement above the temple attracted the attention of thousands of Vedic people who were kneeling in the square. They saw the familiar figure of the high priest and the crown of the high priest that represented the supreme dignity and power. They saw that on the high platform of the temple in the distance, the high priest, supported by Oris, knelt down in front of the tall white man who claimed to be descended from the heavens, causing a huge shock in people's hearts. High priest Adip is the elder of Great Falls. He pulled Great Falls from the precipitous cliff back to the golden age of powerful and prosperous. He is the high priest who talks to the gods and is blessed by the gods, but now this one the great leader actually worshipped respectfully in front of the white-skinned giant who claimed to be the of heaven. Is this giant really the of heaven descending to the earth? Oris helped his dying grandfather to pose so that he fell in front of Hader's toes, then covered his mouth with a thick throat, imitating his grandfather's illegible voice because of his old age, and said, "Great God. God, the goddess of the sea and the harvest, the incarnation of the great surest. Thank you for coming, thank you for your salvation to your people. I wish to return to the kingdom of God and serve you forever." After speaking, Oris suddenly got up, and then said in his own voice, "The high priest meets the true and draws his piety. The soul has been accessed by the gods to enjoy eternal life." After speaking, Oris instructed the other priests to carry his grandfather down, peeled the skin and opened the chamber to make a non-corrosive body, and then parked for a year before burying. This is a noble funeral for the priest, and the chief Hader agreed to Oris' request, and then the people of Great Falls watched the old leader who had returned to heaven with his own eyes. The high priest Adipu was cut through his belly with bone knives by two priests in the square, with blood. The gushing, finally scraping the bones and plucking the meat, resewing the bones and filings into the skin, and made a corpse with only human skin and human bones, and placed it in the shrine just built of wood in the square. Then Oris personally led his people into the shrine to salute the corpse of the old priest. According to the custom, Adip's corpse would be admired for 1 year, and then washed and buried in the ground again. Hader and Hudic looked at Oris in the shrine in the distance, and there was a glimmer of jealousy in their eyes. Hudic thought for a while and leaned over Hader and whispered. The old priest was still breathing, but this Oris insisted that he was dead, and then let his grandfather be skinned and killed. These savages are not terrible no matter how savage it is, but there is wisdom in the brutality of Oris. I think we must make good use of him and also guard against him. Hader used his nails to pick his teeth, but the shreds of meat in his teeth were still stubborn. This made Hader a little irritable. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's okay. We Vikings are not afraid of difficulties. We cannot solve any problems with one axe. Just 2 axes. Can a savage be more powerful than a matchlock?" "That's what I said," Hudic nodded, and then said with some worry, "But I think we still have to send someone to monitor this Oris, lest he has other thoughts." Hader has just known from the inquiry of Oris and others that there are hundreds of large and small tribes in the north of Wenland. You reading www, can't you? Some of them are nominally subordinates of Great Falls, some are completely independent, and many are Kismo tribes. Hader didn't want to make long-distance expeditions. At the same time, he felt that there were too many warriors in Great Falls. It's better to let Grand Rapids instead fight against the savage tribe. We ask Oris to call all the leaders of the Indian tribes under the jurisdiction of Great Falls, and then order them to be loyal to me, and then we let Great Falls go to conquer all the tribes in the northern region, and wait until all the savages are conquered. The north, the warrior power of the tribe will consume a lot, so let's take them back to the city of Harut. Hader's thoughts made Hudic think deeply. He nodded, "Yes. We will guard in Great Falls, and let Oris send warriors to conquer the northern tribes." Great Falls has more than 50 White Wolf warriors and 3 with more than 100 warriors. If you organize a team of 500 people, you can definitely sweep the entire north and let them consume themselves to contribute to us. This is a clever trick. Hudic also laughed. Circumstances changed people, difficulties tempered people, and the commanders of the 2 Viking militias also grew slowly during the war. Hader and Hudic thought for a while. After perfecting the plan, they called Oris into the temple and ordered him to organize 400 warriors to conquer the tribes in the north that did not subdue the king, and then take all the tribes that were conquered. The population returned to Great Falls, and at the same time the tribes that obeyed the rule of Great Falls were also relocated. After listening to Oris, his face was very ugly. He was very resistant in his heart, But he also knew that he was unable to resist, and the fear of Hader in his heart became deeper and deeper. He never thought that this giant would have such a terrible plan to make himself. The soldiers went to fight with other tribes to help him conquer the northern islands. Chapter 78, Faith. Although he was unwilling, Orus still felt that his life was more important. Under the urging of Hader's stern eyes, Orus knelt down on the spot to be loyal, and then went to organize the personnel. Soon, Orus summoned 500 warriors. Among them, 57 were the bravest and highest-ranking White Wolf warriors, 340 ordinary warriors, and more than 100 teenagers. With the elderly over 40 years old, these male and middle-aged young people are brave, and the elderly have experience and can also participate in wars as samurai. The team of more than 500 people gathered in the end, leaving only women, children, and a small number of teenagers and elderly people left behind in Great Falls, with children from the family of the Great Falls warriors as hostages, and holding the chief priest of Orus and all the leaders of the sacrifices. Hader is very relieved that the team of more than 500 people in Great Falls knows that they will definitely die force after bowing to Hader, the incarnation of the above the temple. More than 500 warriors left Grand Rapids under the leadership of more than 50 White Wolf warriors, and hurried towards the tribe who refused to obey Wanghu in the distance. 10 Icelandic musketeers followed them, with the endorsement of the old city lord and high priest Adip, and the miraculous performance of the soul leaving before his death. The people of Great Falls have firmly believed that Hader, the tall white man, is the incarnation of the of heaven. When a person believes something, even if it is a lie, one's own brain will find a reason for the lie. The height of Hader, now different from ordinary people, is an explanation for him as the incarnation of the gods. In the legends of the Beoducs and even other Indians, the gods are tall giants. The great high priest Adipu recognized the deity even more, able to manipulate the thunder and fire, and he was tall. Moreover, Adipu's soul was connected to the kingdom of God to protect eternal life after meeting the deity. The people of Waterfall City believe in the fact that Hader is a god. Therefore, when Orus came out to summon the samurai, he said that the gods issued an edict and asked Great Falls to send out all the tribes in the north, so that the gods' beliefs would rule the islands. They performed well in battle, and those who believed in the gods would die just like the big sacrifices. After entering the kingdom of God, enjoy eternal happiness. The Beoduc people listened to their morale boosted, and then bearing their sacred duties, they left Grand Rapids with a holy smile on their faces. Belief is a manifestation of people's cognition of the world. Ignorant people believe in various gods because they know nothing about this society. Only when they believe in gods can they find a home for their souls. Cultural people also believe in fixed gods or values, which is the sole destination under the worldview supported by their culture. People without faith cannot understand the performance of devout believers. Hader and Hudic are both believers of God, and Hader maintains some beliefs in the primitive religions of Northern Europe, so they, including the musketeers and spearmen, understand the Great Falls human performance, and at the same time, Hader prayed to God to apologize for his sins, asking God to forgive him for pretending to be a savage god. Although it is named Chang, it is actually a larger village with only temples and city walls. The departure of more than 500 people left the city empty. Hader asked Hudic to bring the white slaves, savages and escorted savages into the city, and asked Orus to settle the people under. Orus was very submissive, not only did his best to do what Hader entrusted to him, but also asked for instructions from time to time. Just like a loyal dog, the addition of more than 200 militiamen and more than 200 slaves has made the houses in Great Falls in short supply. Many slaves are building new houses. In order to satisfy the food and drink problems of more than 500 gods, Orus racks his brains every day. Arranged for the people in the city to go fishing, hunting and gathering fruits such as grapes, but because there are too few men left in the city, every day after supplying Hader's subordinates, the people of Great Falls will inevitably have a few hungry. This phenomenon was discovered by Hudic within a few days and told Hader. The two discussed it for a while before asking Blackstone to call Orus into the temple. Meet the great god. Meet the Lord. Hudic, entering the temple, Orus bowed to the ground and said in the Icelandic language that he had just learned and was not fluent. Orus, you are very smart. You are very loyal to me. This is good. Hader smiled and looked at the young man in front of him. Learn Old Norse. It will be very useful for you. In order to show his power and mystery, Hader ordered all his subordinates to change the Icelandic name to Old Norse, so that the sound would be more historical. Aeolus looked up at Hader, and asked, "What is the matter with the great Lord God who ordered me to come? If so, please tell me. I heard that you have made the people of Great Falls hungry in order to eat well for my soldiers and slaves. Isn't it?" Hader quietly looked at Oris and asked. Aeolus bent his legs down before he straightened up, and said with his forehead to the ground, "It's a humble villain's mistake, please punish the Lord God, get up first." Hader snorted and said, "From tomorrow I will let my Bedak slaves and Akismo slaves go hunting together, and Grand Rapids is also my root city. Part of it, you are all my people, no one is hungry." Hader's decisive words made Oris' eyes reddish, and he said hoarsely, "My benevolent master. Thank you for your care." Hader sounded very useful, and half a day later, he waved his hand until Hudic glared at him for the third time, saying with unfulfilled meaning, "Go down." After Oris left, Hudic got up and looked at Hader. He didn't pull his face until Hader smiled and asked, "You have to be careful of Oris. This person is very slick. Just pretending to be crying, the thoughts in his heart are hidden. It must be deep." Hader shrugged, and you reading www.uucan'tchoo.com said, "I don't have to be careful of him if you are here. I'm just a savage. Although it is a beast that can be killed, do we still need to worry about them?" Hudic's expression slowed down a little, and then he reminded, "We're not sure how long we'll have to wait in Grand Rapids. It's better to transfer the fleet over first, so we'll be too early to wait until the warrior army in Grand Rapids returns with the prisoners." Back to Growth City, Hader patted his head and raised his eyebrows and said, "Yet, I forgot if you don't tell me. Send Polly. Bren is also fine. These two young men have performed well in the last few fights. Polly and Bjorn are Hudic's most proud students. Not only did they get his navigation skills, they were also carefully trained by Hudic in the marching battles. In the recent battle, two young men led the two small groups of musketeers to fight well. The timing and marksmanship of the shots were impressive, and even Hader admired them." Hudic smiled. "I have just sent Polly to take two white slave soldiers to fetch the horses. Would you like to write a letter to Huskard and the family to take you back?" Hader hurriedly got up, then Hudic took out the letter paper, quill pen, and ink in his arms and handed it to the tower. Hader smiled lightly, then he leaned on the stone table and wrote two letters, one to Huskard, explaining the recent situation, and asking him to send people to drive all the boats to build when he arrived in Wetland at the beginning of the year. The former side of the Falls Valley meets the savages of Great Falls. The second letter is to his wife Catelyn and his sons Olav and Olaf. The letter contains both a brief description of going out for dozens of days and deep thoughts for his family. An hour later, Polly, wearing a half-length plate armor, left Great Falls with two white slave soldiers riding on Hudic's horse, carrying two letters from Hader in his arms. Chapter 79, There Must Be a Good Way to Manage Savages. Julian calendar October 16, 2850. White Wolf warriors of Great Falls returned to the front of Great Falls with less than 300 men and thousands of Bedaks from various tribes. Hader, who had been waiting for a long time, brought his Viking militia phalanx to perform once again the mighty military formation and the magical and terrifying sky fire and thunder, so that people from various tribes who had been captured by the warriors of Great Falls or threatened to come from afar were all don't dare to complain anymore. The White Wolf warrior is the most powerful and the highest-ranking warrior among the Bedaks. It is the administrator second only to the sacrifice. The appearance of each White Wolf warrior means that a White Wolf is killed. The samurai who can kill the White Wolf alone represents that his bravery and martial arts are the top existence in the tribe. There is no White Wolf warrior in the general small tribe, or only the chief is a White Wolf warrior. Therefore, Great Falls City has more than 50 White Wolf warriors, leading hundreds of warriors and causing many small tribes to surrender as soon as they appear. Even if they encounter a large tribe with a population of 400 to 500, they can still survive a battle, conquer them. After all, there is a big gap between the samurai and the samurai. The courage, physical strength, fighting skills and number of combatants of the Great Falls warriors are all overwhelming advantages. In 1 month, there are only more than 300 warriors of the 500 warriors in Great Falls, but the entire northern tribes in the northeast of Vinland Island to the west of the Changlingshan Peninsula have been conquered and destroyed, and many rebels have been killed. The samurai males, a total of nearly 3,000 people, were taken to Great Falls, and 500 Akismo slaves came. Hader returned to the temple after putting on the stick and showing his face, and is now drinking the newly brewed wine this year with Hudic. It didn't take long for Bren to walk in with Blackstone and Oris. Oris first kneeled down to salute, and then raised his head to report to Hader. Just now, Hader ordered Bjorn to take Blackstone and Oris to set up the returning warriors and prisoners, because the remaining savages and slaves in Great Falls have built a lot of wooden houses after more than 10 days of hard work. Thousands of people squeezed 1. The squeeze also barely stayed. Now Bren brought Oris and Blackstone to report the situation. In fact, the real thing is to be handed over to Oris. Because he is the head of Great Falls, it is most convenient to direct the sacrifices and warriors of Great Falls, but to prevent only when he makes small moves. Bren and Blackstone are next to him. They are called assistants, and they are really surveillance. It has been more than a month since I surrendered to Heir. Although Oris' Old Norse language still has some vocabulary, there is basically no problem in communication. He first reported the number of people counted, and then how to arrange himself and prepare to preach belief in the gods, and let everyone convert to Hadal's plan. Said Heir was non-committal, but Hudic raised his eyebrows and asked, "Are there more than 3,000 people in the entire northern part of Wenland?" He looked at Blackstone and Bjorn. Knowing that Hudic was worried that Oris was lying, he hurriedly stepped forward and said, "There were indeed only more than 3,700 savages of the two races during the inventory. Among them, there were only more than 1,300 men. All the old people were killed. Women and children were killed. 2,000 people, Wenland's area and rich products shouldn't be so few people." Hudic frowned and muttered, "Even if there is no contact with the outside world, the population of primitive savages relying on abundant prey and land to breed should not be low." In Iceland, Blackstone immediately sternly reprimanded Oris in Bedic language. Oris replied with a panic on his face. After a long time, Blackstone said, "Oris said that the population on the island was originally large, twice as many as it is now. But because of leprosy, Blackstone was affected by the white slaves and confused smallpox with hornet, and the epidemic of typhoid and other disease curses. The wild people on the island died a lot. I heard the people say that my tribe used to be like this." Oris said Wenland, the environment in the north is not as good as in the south. The population used to be smaller than that in the south, but now it is even smaller. Hudic and Heir looked at each other and said, "The savages really can't resist smallpox and other diseases, and what we know is the same." Heir whispered, "Men. It's not a bad thing for savages to die too many. We have fewer people. Isn't it more convenient to manage weak savages?" The scar on the corner of Hudic's eyes flicked, and he grinned. "Yes. The idea of savages governing savages is the method we have all past. Too powerful savages may not be obedient to manage. In the current era, there is no so-called nationalism, and there is no clear ideology of the nation-state. Therefore, whether it is the four Khanates, the Ottoman Emperor, who is known as the successor of Eastern Rome, and even the United Kingdom of England, they all rule many in the country. The nation has annexed many countries. Of course, there are uprisings, riots and even coups in various countries, but these have nothing to do with the people at the grassroots level. They are all movements controlled by the nobles to fight for rights. The current raging cleansing and suppression of the Huguenot War in France was launched by the old school of ambitious aristocrats headed by the Queen Mother and the reformists headed by Prime Minister Richelieu and French King Louis XII in order to control power. War. It's just that the nobility and army of the Huguenots will be completely defeated in less than a year. Prime Minister Richelieu will completely become a European figure, and will lead France to the road of the Great Solar Empire together with Louis XII. Heir and others have also discussed how to rule savages before. They all know that ignorant savages only need to fear and respect the ruler. However, the difference in culture and language and the savage ignorance of savages are still a problem. Later, Heine proposed that he could imitate England by assimilating the savages with culture, and at the same time set up a savage living area www.uxiaspit.com to send the governor to manage the savages, just like England is to Ireland and Denmark is to Iceland. Heir and others all recognized Heine's proposition, and then Olaf quietly put forward the proposition of controlling barbarians with barbarians, is to reform the belief of the savages, and unify the gods of all tribes into Heir, the incarnation of the who masters the sky, fire and thunder. So that the Heir family will become a family with the blood of the gods and have a long-term belief basis for ruling the savages. Olaf believes that as long as the savages cannot be civilized, the foundation of the Heir family with the blood of the gods to rule the savages will always exist. Then the first and second batches of savages who were the first to submit will have the same status as the white slaves or even the Icelanders, and then they will rule and conquer the uncivilized savages that do not obey the rule of the gods. In this way, the Heir family will manage the savages and nobles. Gods and savage nobles are the class that manages savages because the savage nobles were the earliest conquered savages, their beliefs were first naturalized, and their imprints were inseparable from the Heir family. The status and rights to manage the savages were also granted by the Heir family, and they had to maintain Hader's dominant position. The ultimate ideal state is that the Hader family manages the naturalized savage aristocracy, the savage aristocracy manages the newly conquered savage leader, and the savage leader manages the savage. The layered contracting mechanism not only reduces the cost, but also ensures the rule of the Hader family. Olaf's idea is to refer to the relationship between the Japanese emperor, the of the world, the shogunate, and the daimyo, as well as the various practices and policies of European medieval knighthood management, giants, how mature women eating raw urchins, Mongolians, Koreans, and Han Chinese. Eventually, a blend of political ideas. Although it is still immature, Hader, Hagrid, Hyena, Hudic and others have been astonished by speaking out, and they have accepted it with conviction. Chapter 80, Return triumphantly on land and water. Wendland entered October and began to have autumn rains and patters after every rain. The weather is always much colder. When the end of the month comes, the wild people in Great Falls are wrapped in a reindeer leather coat. Hader also added a set of seal leather jackets on top of a linen robe. He took Hudic and a few others around the city, watching the savages busy. No one was gathering food and wood, stomping his feet, and sighed, "This year is better than this year, it was colder last year." Hudic also put on a white wolf cloak, rubbed his fingers, felt the coolness, and exhaled white breath. How it feels like October in Iceland. The weather in these years has been somehow hell, cold. After a few mutters, Hader was about to visit the savage residence. Suddenly, he heard the sound of horseshoes not far away. Hudic stood on tiptoe and looked west, and said with a smile, "It's Polly. It looks like it's a boat. The team has been transferred." Polly, who entered the city, saw Hader and Hudic standing out on the streets of the city from a distance. Not only were their heights, but they also had a temperament that was not surpassed by a savage dwarf clown. After a while, Polly and the two white slaves drove up to Hader and Hudic, got off their horses and bowed on one knee and saluted, and then said, "My lord of the city. My captain. I have arrived at the mouth of the waterfall river with a fleet. Hoskard and the young master and the second young master are all waiting for your return." "Haha. Very good." Hader laughed and raised Polly, and asked, "How is our city of Harold?" "Everything is fine in the city. This is a letter from the wife, the eldest master, and the second master, as well as a letter from the manager of Hoskard." Polly took out two sheepskin scrolls from his arms and handed them to Hader. Hader laughed after seeing it, then turned to look at the Blackstone who was waiting behind him. "Go and call Oris." After a while, Blackstone brought Oris over, and after the salute, Oris asked, "Great master, what do you need me to do?" In order to show that he is the incarnation of the gods, Hader also has the right to manage the savages, requiring all savages not to call themselves gods, but to call the master, starting with Oris. Now all savages will bow down when they see Hader. Call Great Master, Kind Master or Sacred Master, etc. Hader motioned to Oris to get up, and then said, "My fleet has reached the mouth of the Falls River. All the people in Great Falls will migrate to my city of Haret. Now you must gather everyone and prepare. Move." Oris was stunned, and then reacted instantly, saying, "Okay. We are fortunate enough to live in the Master's kingdom of heaven. It is a great blessing. I will prepare now." Hudic stopped Oris and said, "Now there are more than 5,100 people in Great Falls. 3 armed merchant ships and 3 big ships can only carry a maximum of 1,000 people at a time. You can arrange for women and children first." Aeolus bowed and nodded and walked away quickly. That afternoon, Oris gathered more than 500 women, children, and wives and children of other tribal leaders and warriors in Great Falls, over 400. Hader watched it again and found that there was no problem. He ordered Polly to lead the first batch of wild men on the boat. And then a total of more than 1,000 people with leather jackets and a few earthen jars left the university under the leadership of a dozen white men. Falls City. I went to the river a dozen miles away to the north. After 10 days, the fleet once again turned around a waterfall valley, and the second batch of women, children, old and young also boarded the ship. This time, there were only more than 2,500 young people left in Great Falls. Hader felt that there was no need to wait for the fleet, so Polly and others did not have to come again, and then he ordered all of Great Falls after the fleet left. The personnel mobilized, preparing to walk back to the city of Haret by land. This time, Hader ordered the people to bring all the food stocks in Great Falls, and then the Viking militia corps took care of the hundreds of sacrificial leaders and led the young warriors to leave the city. Wendland in late autumn is extremely cold. If it weren't for snow, it would be very close to winter. There is an expanse of wetland grassland in the north of Haret city. Because of the frost, The whole wetland is white like ice crystals and snowflakes. In the grassland wetlands, there are Olaf, Yilugi, and Olaf, who hunt and train soldiers. The three of them brought 3 Adan slaves in their hands to hunt and kill the white wolves, which can not only obtain fur and meat, but also reduce the hunters on Vinland Island. Reduce the danger, so that beavers, reindeer, etc. have a better living environment. There are thousands of large and small lakes and a variety of frigid vegetation. It is the most species-rich area on the Aegean Peninsula. In the spring, Olaf collects maple sap and often comes to the wetland. The area here is very large, but in recent years, Hagrid and Hader have led hunting teams to hunt down animals in the wetlands day and night, resulting in fewer reindeer, beavers, white wolves, and foxes that were originally seen everywhere. The skilled hunting veterans among the 7 Adans in the city of Ruth will have to work hard to return home with a full load. Olaf calculated based on the law of the reduction of prey, and according to the speed of killing animals like hares hundreds of advances every day. Maybe there will be few animals in the wetlands in more than 10 years. This phenomenon reminds Olaf of the extinct walruses in Iceland, as well as animals in Australia, Africa, and Southeast Asia that have been extinct since the entry of European colonists. He was still aggrieved by this situation before, but now he has colonized himself. But the reader also understands a bit of truth. Not everyone can control the word greed. Olaf thinks that only Winland will become wealthy in the future. www.wooksiaspit.com. The people in the territory can get work and income without hunting, so that we can promote animal protection. Otherwise everything is empty talk, in order to ensure that a large amount of fur supply is cherished. Beavers, reindeer, foxes and other animals at the lower end of the biological chain can reproduce in large numbers. Olaf mobilized Olaf and Yilugi to bring people to hunt and kill the white wolves. Olaf believes that hunting white wolves can not only train soldiers, improve the organization and courage of the white slaves under them, but also get meat rewards for subordinates, enrich their own small vaults, and maintain the sustainable development of the peninsula wetland for resources. Great thing to count today. More than 200 men from the 3 at Tangli came and killed more than a dozen white wolves. The meat they obtained was enough for each family to eat the broth, but because the white wolves were so swift and brutal, there were some. A white slave was accidentally bitten on his thigh. Fortunately, he didn't hurt badly while wearing a thick leather jacket. He could walk slowly even if he was being held up by someone. Just when the 3 of Olaf were preparing to return home with a full load, they happened to meet Hader and his party of more than 2,000 people who had returned from Great Falls. Piccolo rode a fat reindeer walking on the left front side of Olaf. From a distance, he saw a figure appearing on the northern plateau. He straightened up and looked at it and found that it was really a large group of people, which looked like Bia Tucker Savage, so he turned around and said to Olaf, "Master, there are a lot of wild men in the north." Olaf, and Yilugi are all riding side by side. Everyone rides a horse, but the horses of Olaf and are better, with tall hoods and long legs, smooth muscles, while Yilugi's is just a crossbred arm. The horse looks awkward, but even this kind of horse is a rare thing in the city of Herat. If he hadn't made the Adam paddlehead, he would not even be able to ride the horse. Chapter 81, Herat City. Hearing Piku's exclamation, Olaf, and Yilugi, who were chatting hurriedly, turned their heads and looked north, and they saw a large group of savages. Not the idea of revenge from the savage tribes in the hinterland. Behind Olaf are more than 40 people riding tall reindeer, among them are 30 white teenagers and 10 short savages, and behind them are more than 200 white slaves, and dozens of people walking in the middle, also carrying the white wolf corpse. Olaf has always been the king of children, no matter whether he is in Iceland or Wetland. The children and teenagers of Icelandic families in Herat regard him as the leading brother. The special nature of Icelanders in Vinland prevents their children from helping their family with work every day. So recently, more than a dozen have been following Olaf to hang around and go hunting and exercising every day. They have a great time. Of the more than 30 teenagers behind Olaf's trio, 10 are Icelandic teenagers, and more than 20 are the white slave teenagers in the Adan in the hands of the trio. There are still a dozen short and strong young savages. The most clever, healthy and young slaves selected among the savage slaves in the hands of the Olaf trio: 3 Adan women, young children, individuals sick and unable to travel, and most of the savage slaves stayed in Herat City to weave wooden rattan containers and burn pottery, boil salt, gather fruits and vegetables, and dig out edible ones. Plant rhizomes and other work. What I brought out were the 3 most important subordinates of the Orhads. 10 Icelandic teenagers, need not mention them. The more than 20 white slave teenagers and a dozen savage teenagers are all trusted and favorite subordinates of the three oarheads, so just cultivation of confidence, ready to cultivate and grow up to be a master slave. These 40 teenagers are short in stature and light in weight, so Olaf chose dozens of strong and powerful reindeer from the reindeer raised by Eskimo slaves in the city. The cattle and horses in the city are limited, and they are all useful. They can only temporarily replace the mounts of these teenagers and dwarf young men with reindeer, but as long as they don't wear armor, these reindeer can carry them for more than 10 miles. The only flaw is that they can only run. More than 100 steps will not work. The average height of the caribou on Vinland Island is only 1 meter to 1 meter 2. And the weight is between 130 and 160 kilograms. The largest one is only 1.3 meters tall at the shoulder and weighs 200 kilograms. The short Mongolian horse is a lot smaller, and is at most about the same size as the hybrid earth horses commonly found in the Ming Dynasty, Korea, and Yunnan of the time, and the weight is much lighter. It is impossible to be a cavalry mount, but it is not a problem to provide young people and people with a shorter stature and lighter weight to ride. It belongs to the mount that is now emergency replacement in Herat City. Olaf looked forward carefully and found that among the savages walking in the forefront were 2 white men on horseback. It seemed that they were Father Hader and Uncle Hudik. Behind them there were Viking militias walking in the snake formation at Stad, who is back. Lord Hader returned with his savage captives. Olaf also saw the situation in front clearly at this time, said with a smile, and then hit the horse towards the front to meet him. Olaf also hurriedly led others to follow. After the father and son met, there was another warm talk, and then the two groups returned to Herat City together. The city of Herat is located to the northeast of the later port of Trapezi. The terrain nearby is not high, and the overall terrain is flat. You can see many hills and small hills and ponds everywhere. Unlike the development of the Razor Mountain, the pond surrounding the Razor Mountain has been leveled a long time ago. Since the hard work of hundreds of people from last year to the present, the city of Herat has already taken shape. Hader led more than 2,000 Beducks and more than 200 Akismas back to the city of Herat. From a distance, he saw the wall made of one-person stone and soil in the north, as well as behind the wall. Hader Castle Beduck slaves and Akismo slaves were led by the white slaves and the Icelanders to carry stone and soil to make the city wall. When you walk into the city, you can see the white slaves and the savage slaves building houses, digging and repairing sewer ditches, and more than a dozen white slaves were busy digging wells, and none of the hundreds of people on the scene were idle. Very good. Hader nodded with a smile when he saw that 3 rows of strong long houses had been built around his castle and the streets were clean. Obviously, he was very satisfied with the performance of Hoskard and Ide in governing the city of Groot during this period. Now the urban structure of Herat City has emerged. As the core figure in Wenland, most Icelanders and some white slaves will live around the castle, and on the periphery are other white slave houses. There are hundreds of houses in the low-lying area between Hagerberg and Herat. It is the settlement of most savages and slaves. Today, wood is still being cut to build wooden houses and houses for the coming thousands of savages. Because of the construction of too many houses, the trees near the city of Groot were almost extinct due to the large-scale construction, so that the slaves had to go deep into the northern Avalon forest to cut down the trees. It seems that the green area cannot be restored after more than 10 years due to the existence of the indigenous people, partly attributed to the 7 Oarheads and partly belonging to the white slaves, the savages, slaves of the Icelandic family. These savages belong to the private property of the leader and the free people, and even the white slaves live in or next to the master's house. Build a separate house to live in. At present, the city of Herat, which has a population of several thousand, has taken the shape of a city, and it will be a brand new city as long as it is built for a period of time. Olaf and others watch the city of Groot every day, so there is no obvious feeling. But for Hader and Hudik and the Viking militias who have not seen for more than 2 months, www.uxiaspit.com, the city of Herat, which can be called the second hometown, has really become more and more majestic. Just after Hader and the others walked into the city of Groot, Hoskard, the 5 Oarheads in the city and several stewards all greeted them. When the crowd met, Hader was very happy. He first called Blackstone and Oris to his side, and then introduced them to everyone. He pulled Hoskard and Yad and said, "Oris and Blackstone can help you manage Great Falls. There are more than 5,000 people, and more than 2,000 old and weak women and children have come before. I think you have arranged for them to build houses. These more than 2,000 strong warriors must be properly managed. You can settle the people first. Wait until the evening, we will arrive again. My castle talks and drinks, After more than 2 months of running in, Hoskard and Yacht had a tacit understanding. They looked at Oris and Blackstone with humble smiles, then nodded and pulled the two to approach the samurai unit behind Hader, first to understand components and various situations, and then make a temporary grouping arrangement. The houses in the savage slave housing area on the west side of Herat City could only accommodate less than 2,000 people. In more than a month, dozens of low-rise longhouses were built, and they were enough to accommodate more than 4,000 people. But now there are more than 5,100 savages in Great Falls alone, and even the original more than 500 people can't live there. But these laborers and slaves can't be allowed to sleep in the wild. Both John and Hoskeld remember that there are no more people living in Hadgerberg except for more than a dozen Icelandic families, and it is a good place to settle. So after vying for Hader's consent, more than 5,000 savage slaves divided 1,300 households into families, and then all the 1,300 households randomly selected 1/3 of them and moved into Hadgerberg. The remaining 2/3 live in the settlements. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82. Zero-Man Corps established. It was late at night until Hoskard and Yacht had settled the savages, and the savages' slaves who had been busy all day fell asleep in exhaustion. There was silence in Hadgerberg. The two arranged for the 12 white slave militiamen to guard Hadgerberg at night and then rode out of Hadgerberg, and soon entered the city of Herat, which is dark and dark on the hillside except for the light from the windows and doors of individual homes. The entire city of Herat is completely dark. Only the wooden windows of Hadgerberg, the tallest in the center, open to reveal the orange light. You can hear singing and singing when you walk in. The clash of pushing cups and changing cups, its lively drinking. Hoskard was also a little greedy, and said with a swallow, "Let's go. We'll all be drunk tonight. We haven't been idle since Olav and Olaf came back from Europe this year. Let's have fun and relax tonight." Yacht got off his horse while speaking, and then handed the reins to the two white slave guards in front of the castle. When Hader walked into the castle, he happened to be seen by Hader. He laughed and got up from the seat, then hugged the two of them, and took them to sit next to him in the empty seats for more than 2 hours. "You can count it. How about it? Our everything done?" Hader looked at the self-ringing bell in the corner, raised his eyebrows, and said, "It's already past 10 o'clock in the night. They are all set up temporarily." After drinking a large glass of beer, Yacht let out a sigh, and hiccuped before wiping off the froth at the corner of his mouth, and said, "But your victory in this expedition is amazing. We never thought you could sweep the whole Wenland. In the north, we brought back more than 5,000 savage slaves, and we don't have to worry about no one working in the city of Grote. Haha." The many leaders around the long table laughed. Hoskard also drank a glass of beer, but he saw other questions and frowned and asked, "Hader, the development plan that you lead us all, is just enough for more than 1,000 people. Now there are more than 5,000 more slaves, and most of them are from Bedak. I think our management in Grote City needs to be adjusted." Hoskard's words made everyone lost in thought, because the habit of drinking and chatting in Hader Fort last winter made everyone inseparable between work and life. Hader only wanted to unify Wenland as soon as possible, and then rule the savages, mobilize a huge number of people to build the city of Herat. But now he really has a large number of savages' slaves in his hands, and he is a little confused, and he doesn't know what to do. For a while Yacht smiled, then took out a sheepskin scroll in his arms and handed it to Hader, saying, "Hagrid sent a letter yesterday. He said that he had already wiped out dozens of tribes in the southern part of England. And now he has reached the southeast corner of Bacon's Lake. He has captured 1,000 prisoners and plans to destroy Beatau in Bacon's Lake. Klein leader tribe." However, he was worried that the leader of the Beataks was too powerful. If his captives were bewitched by the Bacons in the battle, it would be dangerous to bravely resist. He didn't want to fail because of his mistakes and carelessness, so asked to send a fleet to Changhai, southwest of Wenland, and he would send white slaves and savage slaves to the middle reaches to wait. After sending away the slaves and captives, he will be able to concentrate his forces to annihilate the Bacon's Long Lake tribe, the most powerful leader among the Beataks. Makes our city of Herat unify Wenland." While Yacht was speaking, Hader had read Hagrid's letter. He said in a deep voice, "According to the information I have received, the most powerful savage tribe on Vinland Island is the tribe of Bacon's Long Lake. They are the leaders of the Beatak Alliance. It is said that there are 7 to 8,000 people, and the tribe also has more than 1,000 people. They are very powerful. Hagrid himself wants to conquer the Bacon's Long Lake tribe will be very difficult. I think I might as well take the Viking militia and some White Wolf warriors to support him. Then everyone followed Hader's words and started the discussion. Basically, their opinions were in favor of conquering the Bacon's Long Lake tribe, and then unanimously passed the decision to reorganize the expedition team to support the Seven Oars. Also sent some brave and strong white slaves and savage slaves to make their due contributions to the final conquest of Hrut Helot City's next strategic policy was determined, and then everyone had a drink until midnight before they dispersed. Olaf went to rest after talking about business. After Hader got up the next morning, he sent someone to send a letter to Hagrid, asking him to suspend the offensive, and wait until he led the army, and then work together to attack the Bacon's Long Lake tribe after breakfast. Hader and Hudix began to gather the Viking militia, adding Paddlehead, and the captain, and then moved out the guns and weapons that were in the castle yesterday, preparing to count the number of people then. According to the strategy set last night, a large army of 800 people with Viking militia and auxiliary soldiers as the core and 500 White Wolf warriors and elite warriors as the flanks was formed. By then, even more than 200 people in Shanghai will have it. An army of 1,000 people, thousands of troops, advanced weapons, and high morale of constant victories will surely defeat Beedek's Lord in one fell swoop and lay a solid foundation for the rule of Vinland. With the full cooperation of leaders of all sizes, a large force of 800 people was formed before noon, and then Hader and Hudix led the team into the wetland forest in the north for training. The main purpose of this training is passwords and cooperation. Hader does not ask for anything else. He only hopes that the savage warriors can understand the commands, understand the semaphore, and then obey the command. The current command of the 300-person white team is not a problem, as long as it can make two. If a team obeys orders and cooperates, you can. Expedition Hudix is indeed a senior and veteran mercenary leader, and he does have a brush for training soldiers. In 2 days, the 800-man army formed by these two completely different teams has some appearance. 5 days later, after a training session, Hader and Hudix were very satisfied, and then they led the army to leave Herat City in transit point by boat in the morning of the next day, driving west along the coastline of the southern part of Vinland, and arrived in the same afternoon to the lower reaches of the West Long River on November 3rd. After a night of rest, the boat began to flow upwards, and then after more than 10 nautical miles, the river narrowed, and some white slaves went down and crossed a river bend. Next to a waterfall not far away, they docked. Hader sent people to explore the surroundings on horseback to see if he could meet Hagrid's men. Waited for more than 3 hours, until the army was ready to have lunch. The spies brought back a soldier of Hagrid's white slaves. Wooksiaspit the Lord. My master led the militia to be stationed not far from the north. Hagrid's white slave soldiers briefed Hader on the situation. Hader asked, "Did he receive my letter to Hagrid?" "The master received it 3 days ago." Hader continued to ask, "Why didn't Hagrid come to see me?" "The master asked me to come and talk to you first. He will personally bring more than 1,000 savage slaves over." Hader nodded, then waved his hand to signal the white slave soldiers to retreat. When the sun went west in the afternoon, Hagrid and Kadir showed up on the shore with more than 1,000 people. Mightily, Hader asked Hagrid to get on the boat to talk, and then they learned more about Hagrid's control. Regarding the situation of the Bacon's Long Lake tribe, a battle plan was formulated immediately after. Hader led 800 troops to disembark and gather on the shore. Then Hagrid ordered the 3 heads of savage slaves he appointed to lead the slaves on board. At the same time, several Icelandic musketeers and white slaves were on board. Spearmen, they are soldiers who escorted slaves as Hagrid slaughtered chiefs, sacrifices and daring warriors along the way. The 1,200 savages he captured were in awe and fear of him. Now only a soldier with a matchlock can make 1,000 people dare not breathe. If Hagrid gets angry, even the children and women among the savage slaves will be trembling constantly, and the men will be devoid of expression. So 6 soldiers and 3 newly promoted savage leaders turned more than 1,000 savage slaves into docile sheep, and got on the boat obediently. This is often the case. If a person is afraid, he will lose the idea of resisting, even if he has the ability to resist. Chapter 83, The Movement of the French. Due to the increase in the population of the city of Herat, the hunt sail clippers stayed on the Nujao Peninsula to fish every day, relying on a large number of catches to supplement the food that the city of Herat is gradually unable to make ends meet. This time there are only 5 ships in the fleet. In order to load more people, The 3 armed merchant ships also unloaded the smallest 9-pounder guns, which happened to be pulled by the Heudic ox cart, and they fired a few shots to break their walls when they were preparing to attack the Bacon's Long Lake tribe after the 5 big ships left. Hader sighed, looked at Hagrid with admiration, and said to Heudic and Kadir next to him, in front of Hagrid, the strongest savages are also like a mouse. I think his iron-blooded wrists are more effective against wild people than my gentle way. Hader, Hagrid, Heudic, and Kadir led a 1,000-man army from the middle reaches of the Cakesun River, the later White Bear River, named after Hader wanted to win a battle, to the north, and then arrived at Hagrid near night. The previous temporary camp pointing to the north in the night, Hagrid said, I have already been explored. Going further north for about 250 miles is Bacon's Long Lake. The leader of the Beothuk tribe is in the northeast of Long Lake Angle. According to my observations over the past 2 days, they seem to have realized our strategic purpose. Now all the tribes around Changhu are gathering and relocating there, and many strong warriors have also been transferred to the Changhu tribe. I guess it is now long. The population of the lake has reached 4,000 people. Heudic sneered and said, ignorant savages. There must be savages in the tribes we wiped out in the north and south that fled to the vicinity of Long Lake, and then the Bacon's Long Lake tribe knew that we were going to eliminate all the savage tribes, and then thought it is a pitiful worm to mobilize all the people under the alliance in an attempt to resist us. Even if they rely on the Long Lake to temporarily support the rations of 5,000 or 6,000 people, when it gets colder, when the lake freezes, these savages will still spread out to seek life. If you don't beat him in time, the Long Lake tribe will be hollowed out by too many alliance members over time. I am afraid that many people will freeze and starve to death this winter. When the 3 of them thought that it was true, Kadir laughed. Perhaps they learned of our strength from the people who fled from other tribes, and they had to sacrifice to resist us. Hader snorted coldly, scratched his itchy scalp and said, if we don't have enough strength, we can only let them go this year, but now these savages gathered in Long Lake are the best chance to be defeated by us in one fell swoop. With spears, artillery, plate armor, and the best soldiers on Vinland Island, you can win even against 10,000 savage warriors. Hader's loud words made the other 3 people firm their conviction, and then waited until the next morning to have dinner. The army of thousands packed up and left the simple camp, led by the white slave scout trained by Hagrid, and headed north. The Long Lake slowly approached. 4 days later, Hader led an army to bypass the lakes in the south of Changhu Lake, which is still called Xiaolong Lake, and then arrived at the south bank of Changhu Lake and built a camp. The Long Lake is shaped like an upper arc crescent, and Hader's camp is built on the inner side of the arc on the south bank, and further south there is an irregular long lake. Standing on the shore, you can clearly see the far northeast. There are faint villages on the shore of Changhu, and that is where the Changhu tribe is located. When you approach Changhu, you can see tribes of all sizes appearing in the field of vision. Some are old villages, and some are just newly built wooden houses. 500 savages and warriors conquered all these tribes along the way. The slaughter, but after ordering the tribal leaders to be loyal to Hader, the god, they seized their food, and led the leaders of various tribes to follow in the auxiliary army as slaves. Now he is about to attack the Long Lake tribe, and it is inconvenient to threaten too many savage slaves. Hader intends to let the leaders of these tribes see with their own eyes how powerful the forces of the gods are, and see with their own eyes how their lord is destroyed. They completely surrendered. Although Hader's army this time far exceeds the savages of various tribes, there are still some savages fleeing in the chaos, which has caused the Bacon's Long Lake tribe to have learned of the movement and location of Hader's army. So that night, a small group of savage warriors approached the camp of Hader's army under the leadership of 2 white wolf warriors, both to spy on the situation and to harass. Hader camp had both savages and Icelandic and white slave militias at night. The enemy was spotted as soon as they approached. Then the white wolf warriors first reported to the 2 Icelandic musketeers, and then quietly lurked. After a while, the team of savage warriors tried to reach into the camp to assassinate a few people, but was violently killed by the lurking white wolf warriors, and after a few shots, the battle ended. The white wolf warrior, headed by the warriors of the Bacon's Long Lake tribe, was shot and killed by Icelandic musketeers, and the other was besieged and killed. The remaining warriors realized that the white man in the east had actually mastered the sky fire and the sky thunder, and they knelt instantly, begging for mercy. Half an hour later, Heudic interrogated a few captive warriors in a large tent made of animal skins and wood, and then went to find Hader. Just now the warriors of the Long Lake tribe have all explained that there are now 5,000 people in their tribe, of which there are more than 3,000 males and warriors, and more importantly, their high priest seems to have occupied it. The French on the other side of the strait contacted you read www.uakanchu.com wants to ask the French to help them. It is said that a French musketeer will come tomorrow. Hudic brought back a piece of bad news, which caused Hayder to wake up from the confusion in an instant, and then summoned Hagrid and Kadir, and the two discussed the news for a long time. Hayder quickly settled his mood, looked at Hagrid, and asked, "You have a lot of dealings with Quebec. Do you think the French will help the Beatles? It should be true. The Quebec fleet did not receive our fur goods 4 months ago. At that time, their captain was very angry. I think this time Champlain and Quebec also deliberately sent people to support the Beatles people. For Champlain's understanding, although he has the purpose of causing us trouble, his real purpose is to mediate the struggle between Vinland. After all, a unified Vinland Island is not in the interest of the French." Hagrid thought about it and slowly said his thoughts. Everyone fell into deep thought. After a long time, Kadir asked, "Hagrid, how many French people are in Quebec?" Hagrid thought for a while and said, "There are less than 400 people. Quebec City seems to have only more than 80 whites and 400 Indian slaves. Europe, there are not many people. We don't have to be afraid of him." Kadir's eyes were stellar and said, "Now America is a treasure land, with countless slaves and resources, vast land and inexhaustible timber, fur, and fisheries. In fact, we, the French and the British, it is a competitive relationship. As the immigration of British and French people increases, we are bound to have a war with them. I think it would be better to take advantage of our strength and their weakness to defeat them. Let the British and French know that we Icelanders are not easy to mess with." Quotation mark. Chapter 84, French Motivation. Kadir and Hagrid are both fearless and fearless people, and they are not afraid to know that the French intervene. So Hagrid thought about the situation in the North American colonies and laughed, and said, "In the past 2 years, there have been more and more immigrants from England, Scotland, and Ireland in New England. It seems that there are 5,000 or 6,000 people, although the struggle with the Indians has restrained their strength, but the 2 strongholds of the French on the southeast coast were occupied by the British. I heard from the English fishermen that the British colonial company was also preparing to capture Quebec and expel the French. Hey, let's deal with France now. Guy is a good opportunity." Hayder thought for a while, and felt it was time to show off his strength. "Okay. We will attack the Bacon's Long Lake tribe tomorrow, and if we encounter the French, we will defeat the captives too." Compared to Hagrid's previous experience in Vinland, the British and French colonists were much more miserable. Hagrid and Olaf's reminder attaches great importance to colonial rule. After entering Vinland with white slaves and a small amount of Iceland, he avoided the hinterland with a large number of Beatles, and chose the southeastern peninsula to establish a camp, and then rely on grabbing. Savage hunters increased their labor, while relying on Newfoundland fishing grounds for fishing, and peninsula wetland forests for hunting, ensured sufficient food rations and avoided the famine that plagued French and British colonists not far from the east coast. At the same time, because he is far away from the tribal living area of the Savage Alliance, Hagrid has never been attacked by the large Beothuk tribe, which is much better than the colonists of New England on the east coast. Although the French colonists had a good relationship with the Huron savages and even formed alliances, the savages on the mainland also had a life and death relationship. The most powerful Iroquois alliance on the east coast became rivals with the French colonizers. Has been attacking the French colonies from the beginning of the 17th century to 1628. The mortality rate of the British and French colonies was as high as 1/3. Although some of them were people who died of diseases, but more were killed by savages and besieged by war. And the high mortality rate caused by famine and starvation, due to real reasons. Hagrid's colony had a death rate of just over 1/10 before gaining a foothold. When the number of savages and slaves increased, the death rate did not drop but increased, but the whites basically did not lose their jobs before the end of the 30 Years' War in Europe. France and the United Kingdom had no intention or ability to mobilize their national power to vigorously develop the North American colonies. Even if they had strength after a few decades, the two countries were unwilling to waste more resources on the North American colonies. Their development methods in North America are still very backward, relying on colonial companies and criminals, white people who have lost their land, and other self-development, in contrast to the French colonies of Central and South America and the British colonies of India. The North American colonies have always been raised by stepmothers, and the subsequent independence has now buried its roots, After having breakfast the next morning, the 4 chiefs of heir, Hagrid, Hudic, and Kadir left the camp with an army of thousands of Viking militias and savages and approached north, marched all the way hurriedly. Even if he encountered the savage tribe, he did not attack. In the afternoon, he finally arrived at the northeast corner of Changhu, and saw the Long Lake tribe with a temple fort built with stones 2 miles away. The Changhu tribe is the strongest local power on Wetland Island. It controls hundreds of square kilometers of land and has a population of nearly 10,000. There are 1,700 warriors in its headquarters, and there are more than 300 White Wolf warriors. Called invincible, but now the Long Lake tribe shrinks in the city after discovering that the Hater Legion is approaching, and then the high priest and a white officer are talking eagerly. The white officer was the captain of the French colony of New France, a close comrade-in-arms of the Governor-General, Mr. Champlain, and the distant nephew of Prince Condé, Francis de Bourbon. Francis, as a member of the Bourbon family, although it is said to be scary, but because his grandfather is the youngest son of the first prince, he has only a small territory now, but the men of the Bourbon family always hope to build merits on the battlefield and create brilliant. So the current Prince Henry I of Condé appointed Champlain to replace him to exercise power in New France after he became the governor of New France, and let Francis assist him as Champlain's deputy to manage the middle and low-level officers of New France in order to seize the fur business monopolized in Quebec. British merchants began to looting and occupying French strongholds many times this summer, and then blocked the French port strongholds through armed merchant ships and armed white slaves, and prohibited the delivery of grain to Quebec City, in the hope of persecuting Champlain, and they negotiated cooperation and even handed over Quebec City. Quebec City was established in the middle reaches of the St. Lawrence River, which was the gateway where the river began to widen. The river is rich and extends in all directions. The French and the Hurons have established deep revolutionary friendship and alliances, but because Quebec City is just a leather goods, the trading bases led to insufficient production of rations here, and they all depended on several bases at the sea to provide food. In August, Champlain sent Francis to lead 200 guards stationed on the Gaspé Peninsula at the southern end of the estuary to ensure that the Huron friends and French fishermen on the peninsula provided food for Quebec. When we entered October, Newfoundland among the French population, and the Beothuk alliance on Vinland Island among the Icelandic population sent rituals to cross the Bell Strait to find the French, who found the Basque whaling point in the Red Bay, and then asked for support. The Icelander Hagrid on Vinland has been very docile and honest for many years. Champlain and Francis are also happy to have an Icelandic colony on Vinland, so the relationship has been peaceful for many years. However, this summer the British targeted New France. It is said that the name was changed to Harut City. After the change of the leader named Hader, the Icelanders were no longer submissive. Not only did they no longer sell their fur to the French, they also set off annexation and slavery on the island. Savage war of aggression. This made Champlain very worried when he heard the news. So he sent Francis to lead the army to Vinland, www.uxiaspit.com, to repel the Icelanders and let the Icelanders know how good they were, and then cooperate with them. The Iroquois sought allies to preserve the position and existence of New France under the difficult situation of three-sided attack. The Beothuk people living on the islands on the south bank of the Bell Strait have actually maintained trade ties with the French. The Red Bay Basque whaling site on the north shore was a stronghold established by the Basques more than 100 years ago. It is considered the second group of peoples to log into North America and establish strongholds after the Icelandic Vikings. The French Basques fished here, whaling, sun-dried cod, and then brought back to Europe to sell. Turn a lot of gold coins later. The British also discovered that the Newfoundland waters are a large fishing ground, so there are hundreds of fishing boats competing each year. At present, because the fishing grounds are rich in resources, only the bases for resting and drying the fish are a bit tight, and the catch has not been affected in any way. Now the Red Bay Basque whaling site has been expropriated by the Champlain Gangchang Joint Trading Company as a colony's stronghold for the production of dried cod and fur. After receiving orders from Champlain, Francis led 180 musketeers to the Red Bay Basque whaling site with the sacrifice of the Backens Long Lake tribe, and then recruited 500 Huron warriors there. I took a boat to Wetland Island on the south coast and rushed to the Backens Long Lake tribe day and night. Note: Champlain Gangchang Joint Trading Company. In 1620, Champlain's colonial company and the Sine family company that monopolized the fur business in China merged into one, and then the Sine family was responsible for the acquisition and sales, and the funds were fully advanced by them to serve as New France. The governor Champlain was engaged in the management of the colony of New France and the expansion of fur business strongholds, so he went deep into the upper reaches of the St. Lawrence River to open up strongholds, looking for new savage tribes to trade fur. Chapter 85, The Cannon Blasted His Mother. When Heir led the army to reach the Long Lake tribal city 2 miles before, Francis had only been less than 12 hours, but he was called by the high priest before he could sleep well, and then he panicked and asked Francis to take action to repel the powerful Icelanders. The Changhu tribe is different from other backward tribes. As its leader, the Changhu tribe has long established a fur trade with the French. At the same time, the high priest and other high-level officials have also seen the magic weapon called the matchlock in the hands of the French. He has been sneered at what Heir and others say about the gods mastering the sky, fire and thunder, but after learning that the Great Falls in the north and many tribes in the south have been destroyed, the Changhu tribe, who did not want to be wiped out by the city of Herat, sent someone to invite the French. They think that only the white French, who also have a matchlock, can deal with the white Icelandic people on the southeast peninsula. Mr. Bourbon, please go to war as soon as possible. The enemy of the southeast peninsula has arrived at the door. Our high priest said that as long as you can defeat the enemy, all the leather goods on the island will be sold to you in the future. Francis is surrounded by a Bedak who can speak French. His French is not good, but he still tries his best to translate the words of the high priest to Francis. A group of Icelanders and white slaves rely on the power of matchlock guns at most. Today I will let you savages see what the strength of the French royal guards is. Like other Gallic roosters, Francis exudes pride from the inside out. He never has to look directly at the savages in North America, even if standing opposite is the high priest who controls thousands of people. Mr. Francis turned around and walked out of the room in a cold voice, and then ordered his 180 guards to line up. Francis was wearing a half-length plate armor, a red steel helmet, and a commanding knife in his hand, riding a pure-blooded Arabian horse. He looked adjunai, upright and taller than ordinary people, and looked like a heavenly man in the eyes of the warriors in the tribe. Bedak warriors assembled more than 3,000 people, but Francis was not interested in being with these mobs. Under the guidance of the colonel under Francis, 500 Huron warriors formed a square formation, and then 4 corners surrounded and protected 45 musketeers. This is a simplified version of the Morris Square, because the Huron warriors and Francis has cooperated many times, so it is easy to use. The Bedaks do not have the savage warriors on the mainland, and they have not trained and cooperated. Francis is only prepared to let them assist him and play it well. Under the leadership of Francis, a phalanx of nearly 700 people walked forward, and more than 3,000 Bedak warriors walked behind. The army came out from the gate of the tribe, heading towards what was already visible in the south. The army of 1,000 people moved forward steadily. Today's battles in European countries are still dominated by queuing shots, melee killings, and building bastions to occupy strategic points. If it is facing the army of any European country, Francis will defend the city first, test the reality of the opponent before considering whether to fight, but in his eyes the opponent is just a mob of Icelanders, white slaves and wild people, looking at his own men. The army is almost there, but these people have not been professionally trained, and they will definitely not be their opponents. Francis is very confident, so he directly led the team out of the city to fight against each other, wanting to defeat each other in one fell swoop. Let the Icelanders and Bedaks know how powerful the Kingdom of France and his Bourbon captain is. The Hurons and the Iroquois have been fighting for hundreds of years. The samurai are fierce and undaunted characters. They are much stronger than the Bedaks on the island. The French musketeers also have a strong military discipline and the will to fight. This team can keep their eyes on when queuing to shoot. Even if the comrades around them are knocked down by the opponent's musket, they will not shrink from fear if you follow the normal queuing and shooting methods. Heir's musketeers and spearmen are indeed inferior to Francis's. Maybe the Viking militias will be defeated without 3 rounds of firefighting, and will eventually be defeated, but the cautious Heir is still holding 12 9-pounders at first. Heir was also leading the army to march north, but when he saw the opponent's gate, he walked out a huge phalanx, and the population was close to his own army. Heir knew that it was made up of French soldiers and savage warriors. The phalanx, and there are more savages behind this phalanx. Heir's heart is shaken, knowing that he is about to face a tough battle with a big axe in his hand. Heir shouted, "Stop!" After the order was passed, the Viking militia stopped advancing. Hudic raised his eyebrows, pointed to the front and said, "Should I use artillery?" Heir nodded, and then said, "Although our soldiers are wearing plate armor, there are French musketeers on the opposite side. The number is not less than ours. If we really start, we will most likely suffer. It is better to use artillery to disperse their formation. Do it again. Both Hader and Hudic experienced a battle between Denmark and Sweden when they were young, and saw the power of artillery on the battlefield. Although artillery is now mainly used for defense and siege, some light guns have also been put into use in field battles. Only because of the inconvenience of carrying and affecting the speed of offensive and retreat, the number of artillery input on the battlefield of European countries is much smaller than in the future. In fact, Hader and Hudic didn't know that, as the artillery unit formed by the Nordic line Gustav I improved its artillery a few years later. It shined brightly in the 30-year battlefield battle and defeated the German army in a row, and all countries learned later. Afterwards, developed field artillery and artillery units. Hudic has a stronger military acumen than Hader said. He pulled Hader's hand and reminded, "Don't worry. We don't have professional artillery. The few white slave artillery I have just handed over. Student, the accuracy is very poor. Let the other side walk in and let the artillery do their hands. Then we will use the musketeers to fire and kill the opposing soldiers while in the chaos, and finally just charge." Hader let out a sigh of relief. "Yes. I almost forgot that our artillery is still a novice. You should go to the rear to guide." Hudic nodded and rode and turned to the back of the phalanx, where there were 5 carriages pulling 18 9-pounder guns. The 9-pounder cannon is considered to be the smallest cannon. The overall weight is only over 200 pounds, and the range is between 400 and 600 meters. The power is really flattering. Both siege and naval battles are just better than nothing, but even the 9-pounder guns would still cause great damage to the soldiers if they were fired together to form a barrage. Hudic came to the rear and ordered the white slaves to move down the 18 artillery, then set them up and adjust the muzzle. Hudic adjusted the artillery angles to 35 degrees to the sky in order to make the artillery hit the enemy as close as possible, and finally checked them one by one, and then called the newly trained artillery to the artillery to explain the main points of use again. As the artillery was blocked by a squadron of thousands of soldiers, neither Francis nor his army could see the 2 rows of 18 artillery behind the phalanx of Hader's Viking militia. The enemy stopped and waited for us to attack. This is an expression of timidity. Soldiers, follow me and accelerate. The musketeers are ready. Francis squinted his eyes and looked at the Viking militia phalanx and the tall and burly Hader, Hagrid and Kadir riding on the right side of the phalanx as the distance diminished. Knowing that the leader on horseback and hundreds of thousands of soldiers were all wearing plate armor, Francis was startled and sneered, "Oh my God. These Icelanders are so rich? No wonder they can flatten most of Newfoundland." It turns out that there is plate armor. The savages really have no way to get the plate armor. But in front of the musket, the plate armor has lost the aura of absolute defense. www.wooksiaspet.com. Look, my French musket broke your plate armor. Francis hummed and calculated the distance between the 2 armies, feeling that there were already 300 steps, so he squeezed the command knife in his hand, and was about to get closer to 50 steps before ordering the first shot. He is very confident in the technology of his French musketeers and the muskets produced by the kingdom. His previous experience is that a 30% hit rate is achieved within 300 steps, and a 40% hit rate is achieved within 280 steps. There is a 50% hit rate in 150 moves. Francis had imagined that a few seconds later, he gave an order. With the sound of gunshots and smoke, the mobs on the opposite side would fall down like wheat, and then turn into mice running around, defeating the army. 290 steps, 280 steps, 270 steps. Francis took a slow and deep breath, ready to yell fire at any time, but suddenly he saw the big axe in the hands of the tall leader riding a yellow-maned horse violently waved in front of him. He was puzzled, and he didn't believe it. The Icelanders' musketeers are better than those of France, so it was thought that they were scared and could not help firing in advance. "You can shoot first, and wait until your bullets are empty, just when we harvest your lives." Francis's mouth cocked, and he couldn't help laughing. Bang! Bang! Francis suddenly felt that he vaguely felt a big earthquake tremor, and then heard the familiar and loud gunfire. His eyes dilated, and he clearly saw a cloud of gunpowder smoke rising from the back of the Icelandic soldiers' phalanx, and then many iron ball shells flew up into the sky and quickly fell towards him. Cannon. Damn cannon. Chapter 86, Victory. When the 2 military formations were 270 steps apart, Francis saw that the opponent's artillery hidden behind the phalanx fired shells and heard the roar of the artillery. At that moment, he had no time to think and rolled off his horse subconsciously. Going down, there was only time to shout, "Damn artillery!" Then 18 slap iron whizzed into the square formed by the French musketeers and the Huron warriors. The 9-pound gun represents the caliber of the artillery. There are 9-pound heavy iron bullets, which is the weight of 4 kilograms in later generations. This type of shell is small but has high kinetic energy under the propelling of gunpowder. It can still cause holes when hitting ships in naval battles. Damage 18 artillery shells were fired at the same time, and the iron bullets with the smell of gunpowder smashed into the phalanx. As Francis's phalanx was only 1.5 meters apart, it was still very compact. Only one of the 18 shells missed. The remaining 17 iron bullets instantly smashed through the body of the French soldier and the Huron warrior who had not yet reacted, or smashed their heads. After killing one person, the iron ball shifted its direction unabated and killed them one after another. On the ground, a round of artillery fire directly killed 38 people, including 13 French musketeers and 25 Huron warriors. Nearly 20 people were killed by the iron ball from the sky before they got close to the opponent. Looking at the broken body of the companion and the French musketeer Huron warrior, Francis got up and shouted, "The artillery is not firing fast, hurry up. Burst shooting. Kill the opposite person." The Huron warrior keeps charging. Francis's command made the well-trained French soldiers quickly gather the Huron warriors, and then the heavily deformed phalanx moved forward rapidly. At the same time, the French musketeers raised their matchlock guns and aimed them at the enemy ahead, waiting for Francis to fire. Command Francis abandoned his horse and walked, feeling that the two sides approached the 250 paces before they ordered the shooting. Then the French musketeers stopped and shot forward. In their eyes, dozens of people fell down in response, and then the musketeers walked in an orderly manner. While loading ammunition, the Huron warrior stood in front of them and rushed forward quickly. Heir, Hagrid, Hudic, and Cattle, who rode to the back of the phalanx, saw the Bedak warrior standing in front of the white slave spearmen, were knocked down by French muskets. About 30 people were shot down by the French muskets. Heir gave him the protection of the leather armor, but being hit by a musket may cost half of the casualties. The Bedak people were afraid of muskets, and when they saw the people around them fell to the ground instantly, they felt a sense of fear, feeling that the formation is a bit disorganized. The four Heir hurriedly dispersed to every corner to maintain military discipline, and at the same time allowed the Viking militia to stand firm and wait for it. The appearance of the four leaders and the gods gradually stabilized the mood of the Bedak. Hudic, who has command of the military, calculated the distance between the two sides. The flag in his hand was shaking, and he shouted, "The Bedak warrior and the pikemen rushed in on both sides, and the musketeers are ready to launch. 1, 2, 3, let go." Hudic's voice fell, and the musketeers who had been aiming in the open position had long been allowed to ignite the match rope, and then the explosion sounded like a thunderbolt on a sunny day. Although the sound was not as large as the artillery, it was more concentrated and noisy when the Icelandic musketeers fired. The two sides were already close to 200 paces. This is the distance that Hudic deliberately waited for the Icelandic musketeers to increase their hit rate. The quality of the Viking militia phalanx is not as good as that of the French soldiers, but there are very few French soldiers on the opposite side. Most of them are Huron warriors. The overall quality of the two sides is not much different. Hudic and Heir knew that soldiers of this quality had difficulty maintaining a position when charging, and they would disintegrate at most 200 steps. In order to maintain the battle formation of the Viking militia, they ordered to wait for the opponent to charge, and then wait for the French fire. Only then counterattacked 60 Icelandic musketeers and 20 white slave musketeers. Gendarmerie added to the 1,000-man army, opened fire at the same time. The distance of 200 paces greatly improved the Viking musketeers' hit rate, and the Huron warrior fell instantly. A rough estimate is that there are 40 to 50 people. The team on the opposite side was reduced by 1/10 and then instantly collapsed. Most of the Huron warriors dispersed and charged forward quickly, wanting to break into the Viking militia before the next round of firearms, and play their own roles. His melee strength killed the opponent, but a small number of Huron warriors were shocked. Their pace was getting slower and slower, and they were ready to flee at any time. The distance of 200 paces to face the infantry was only enough time for another 2 rounds of shooting. The musketeers reloaded quickly, and the white slave spearmen and the Bedak warriors with sharp weapons also quickly charged forward. The Huron warrior and the Bedak warrior quickly collided, and then the warriors of the two races exploded with powerful fighting power with the iron sword and spear bestowed by the white master, and then entangled and killed each other. In an instant, a samurai was killed. The white slave spearmen rushed to the battlefield soon afterwards, and then speared them one after another, killing every Huron warrior who tried to rush in. There were only 500 Huron warriors, and 70 or 80 people were killed by artillery and muskets. Among the remaining people, there were only more than 300 brave warriors. When they entangled with the more than 400 Beothuk warriors, they were still in the wind for the time being. Basically every Huron warrior could take away a Beothuk before his death, but the appearance of the white slave pikemen quickly turned the tide of the battle. The tacitly coordinated spearmen turned into meat grinders, constantly killing the Huron warriors approaching. Even if the Huron warriors rushed to the side of the white slave spearmen desperately, the weapons in their hands could not be used against those wearing plate armor. The spearman caused any damage, but was instantly stabbed into hedgehog by spears from all directions. The Huron warrior was quickly killed in half, and when the remaining warriors were about to flee, the 3,000 warriors of the Long Lake tribe also rushed forward. Francis was also preparing to let the French musketeers fire in support. Hudic, Heir, Hagrid, and Kadir turned into small cavalry with spears and axes and rushed into the Long Lake warriors in a gust of wind. The warriors of Long Lake had never seen a cavalry. Hearing the sound of horse hooves and seeing the 4 people rushing on horseback, they were afraid and wanted to turn around to avoid, but Hader's 4-man horse quickly came to the Long Lake warrior in the blink of an eye. He bent down and brandished his weapon. The large axe, spear and long knife easily killed the 7 or 8 White Wolf warriors before the 4 charged. The musketeers approached and attacked the Beothuk warriors in Long Lake from both sides, and the artillery shot the French musketeers on the rear wing, and the Long Lake warriors in the rear cut melons and chopped vegetables. Another White Wolf warrior slashed to death. Hader heard the roar of artillery fire from behind. He was riding a tall horse and looking forward, he saw that the French soldiers who were about to shoot were all lying down, and then the shells killed 2 unresponsive hapless guys, and the Long Lake warrior behind was also smashed. More than 20 people died. Okay, Hader, Hagrid, Hudic, and Kadir are all strong warriors, and their martial arts are also strong. They ride together like a small cavalry team, walking like the wind. In the Long Lake warrior team, constantly leading, taking the life of the samurai made the Changhu samurai cringe, shouting something. Hagrid, who could understand some Beothuk language, smiled and said, "They say we are the incarnation of the of death, haha." Kadir laughed, and Hudic's eye was scarred, and Hader said loudly, "Today, let's let these guys know the sickle of the of death." After 18 cannons fired www.wuxiaspit.com 80 musketeers fired almost at the same time, and the warriors of the Changhu tribe fell down like wheat. The White Wolf warrior and war sacrificial warriors headed by the warriors of the Changhu tribe were almost killed. The remaining warriors saw that the 4 Hatters could not stop them, and the artillery and muskets were so powerful that they all lost their fighting spirit. Hishi, who was leading a small group of warriors to slaughter the remaining Huron warriors, saw that the Long Lake warriors who had attacked him and others at the beginning suddenly shrank and retreated, and hurriedly shouted, "God descends to the world. The power of God cannot be stopped." The ignorant people of Long Lake kneel begging for mercy. Those who kneel and surrender will avoid death. If you continue to resist, your soul will be tortured forever. Following Blackstone's words, the Beothuk warriors of Heart City all repeated, and their voices gradually became uniform, echoing in the sky, causing many Long Lake warriors to kneel and bow their heads, while many others turned around. Flee towards the walled city. Hader saw the Long Lake tribe's army disintegrating and fleeing. He laughed. Hudic first ordered the artillery to fire the last round, and then watched the Long Lake tribe become more and more defeated and raised his arms and shouted, "Charge! Go chase!" Hudic gave an order, and the Viking militia united into formation and slowly moved forward. 500 people formed a high-spirited team. More than 400 warriors gathered the captives and made up for the wounded, but they did not catch up for the time being. 3 rounds of blows by 12 9-pounder guns completely smashed the fighting spirit of the warriors of the Long Lake tribe. The French soldiers were hit by 5 more, and before Francis could react, they were scattered by the army of savages who fled back and even stepped on them. Several soldiers died. Oops! Francis hurriedly turned and ran away, while shouting, "Quick! Run away! Don't be trampled to death!" Chapter 87, Hader of Vinland. In the process of the Great Lake tribe defeat and the pursuit of the Viking Legion, the morale of both sides went down one after another. The warriors of the Long Lake tribe either surrendered or were killed, and only half of them were left after they all fled into the city and closed the gate. The Viking militia corps blocked the east gate of the Changhu tribe, and the warrior regiment on one side took care of the nearly 1,000 captured Changhu warriors, the remnants of France and the Long Lake tribes. Ye bravely hid in the city like bereavement dogs, surrounded by wooden sticks behind the city gate in front of the temple, waiting for the command of the high priest. The high priest of the Changhu tribe learned of the result of the defeat, and saw that his afterimage was almost feigned. He was so distressed that he couldn't believe that his 3,000 army, supported by 500 French troops, was quickly defeated by only 1,000. Human Herod's city army. Francis also had a pale face, a trance, and his clothes crooked. It was difficult for him to accept the fact that he was defeated by the rabble Icelanders, and he still had more people on one side and fewer people on the other. Behind Francis were fewer than 130 French soldiers. They were all disheveled and dusty. Many of them even lost their muskets. Viking militiamen outside the castle surrounded the gate. After the sound of horseshoes, the 4 leaders came to the gate to observe the low castle. Innocent savages. Do they think this tiny castle can stop us? Hagrid sneered. I think you can't stand it if you bombard them, Hudic also said, raising his whip and pointing at the city wall in front of him. Hader said in a cold voice, yes. What's the use of them hiding in? The order goes on, and the artillery keeps blasting in. When will they surrender and when will we cease fire? As Hader's order passed down, 18 artillery guns were pulled to the front of the city, and after Hudic adjusted the barrels himself, the 12 artillery barrels turned up to the sky at a 45-degree angle, and 12 shells were fired at the same time. The iron ball whizzed out and fell into the city, while the remaining 6 cannons fired at the city wall and gate. As the shells fell into the city, the warriors gathered in front of the temple were instantly killed and injured. Francis hurriedly stretched out his hand to pull the high priest to his knees, and then got into the back of the temple. Boom! Hader's army carried enough artillery shells and gunpowder packs. After half an hour of bombardment, the gate was broken and dumped, and the warriors in the city fled to every corner through the doorway. You can see that there is almost no resistance inside. After Hahaha left, Enkadir took the lead in riding into the city with a team of spearmen, musketeers, and White Wolf soldiers on horseback. Then the Viking militias and warriors all rushed into the city and scattered to beat, smash and burn. The shouts of killing and crying in the city instantly sounded in every corner. When the sun was westward, every member of the Viking corps returned with full success, returning to the temple with fur, jade, and slaves. White Wolf samurai and many other warriors also returned to the temple with their captives and iron objects such as glass balls, mirrors, swords and so on. Hader and Hagrid climbed the stone steps in front of the temple. While Hudic and Kadir maintained discipline in the city. After a while, Velatu and Lund, and Francis and the high priest, who were crushed by the Blackstone, came over. Hagrid sneered, took out the arquebus that was full of bullets behind him, and smashed the head of the high priest in front of more than 6,000 people in the city. Then he smiled cruelly. This is the fate of the blasphemer. Who else wants to resist? Unwilling to submit to the city of Grote, Blackstone and many warriors repeated Hagrid's words in Beeduk, so that everyone in the city could hear them clearly, and then all the savages knelt on the ground in panic and pain. Hader didn't say a word, looked at Francis, and found that the young Frenchman seemed to be frightened by the body of the high priest who killed Hagrid next to him, so he asked, young man, what is your name? Hader is 42 years old this year. Looking at Francis in front of him calmly. Francis has always considered himself a brave French soldier who pursues honor. Even in the face of death, he will not hesitate to show the demeanor of aristocrats and soldiers of the kingdom, but he was defeated and saw the white-bearded man shot and collapsed. Behind the high priest's head, Francis was nervous when he smelled the blood on the tip of his nose, and sweat broke out all over his body. After Hader asked himself happily, the knowledgeable Francis heard that the giant was talking about a mixture of Latin and English with some accents. Fortunately, he could understand, so he could no longer afford the French aristocracy. The body involuntarily saluted and said in English, Your Excellency. I am Francis de Bourbon, an officer of the Kingdom of France and New France. Oh? The nobleman of the Bourbon family. When Hader heard Francis's surname, he thought about moving forward and proactively stretched out his hand, saying, The battlefield is ruthless, but in this uncivilized primitive wasteland, where you can make a friend. Just like my brother Hagrid and Mr. Champlain, be a mutually supportive friend. What do you say? Mr. Bourbon. Francis breathed a sigh of relief, and then he couldn't help but increase his affection for Hader. Then he squeezed Hader's wide palm, looked up at this gentleman, and smiled. Yes. I didn't know that it was Champlain before the war. Friends, your city of Herod is also well known in New France. We also have old friendships with the Changhu tribe, so we have a misunderstanding. I hope you will understand. It's okay, we don't know each other." Hader smiled and slapped Francis with a dust. "Your Excellency." Francis blushed and retorted, "I'm sorry," Hader said, turning his head. "Hudic, we are going to rest in the city tonight. You go to arrange a table of food. I want to talk to Mr. Bourbon, and apologize for him. Go." Before the war, Francis did not look down on Hader and others, but after the defeat, he became a prisoner. Life and death were all within the mind of others. Francis, who was given preferential treatment and respect, already had a great affection for Hader. At the banquet that night, Hader and Francis were sitting next to each other, accompanied by Hagrid, Hudic, and Cattle. "I have sent someone to properly arrange your soldiers www.wuxiaspit.com to provide them with wine and meat. By tomorrow, you can leave Vinland and return to New France, after a full meal." Hader looked like suddenly remembered and said, "Thank you for your generosity." Francis smiled and nodded. Now he has changed into a clean and tidy military uniform. He looks like two people. In the afternoon during the meal, the two parties had a friendly and cordial conversation. First of all, Francis expressed his understanding about Hader's conquest of Long Lake and unification of Vinland, and explained that he would return to New France to seek the consent of the governor of Champlain, and then promote the New France. The relationship of equal cooperation with Vinland. Hader knew very well that his weak foundation could not completely turn his face with the French and British colonists, but after showing his muscles properly, he could gain the respect of their two neighbors, and then let them face the reality of unifying Vinland. It will play a role in getting respect and attention to the exchanges and transactions between Vinland and New France and New England. In the next step, Hader originally wanted to capture the French soldiers, and then let the New France come to redeem them, and if they didn't redeem, they would become white slaves. But after knowing that Francis was a member of the Bourbon family and the highest commander of the new French army, his position was second only to Governor-General Champlain, Hader changed his mind, prepared to win Francis, and then sought the opposition of New France. "My support is at least tacitly acquiescing to my sovereignty over Vinland through Francis's performance." Hader saw that he had agreed, and the next step depends on Champlain's attitude. Hader thinks that he does not want to offend the two neighbors of New France and New England, so after they find that Vinland is not easy to provoke, they should also have a good relationship with their neighbor. Chapter 88, Establishment of Viking Leading System, Part 1. Through the exchanges during the meal just now, Hader has learned from Francis that several strongholds in New France this year have been looted or even occupied by armed British businessmen. This shows that the number of colonists in New England has doubled in recent years, reaching more than 2,000. Human colonists, they feel that relying on the number of colonists far superior to New France is enough to occupy more and better territories. This is an expansion of ambition. The English are squeezing the space of New France. Francis thinks they even have the idea of dominating North America. This is not good news for Hader, but Hader thinks that Champlain, who does not want to be annexed or even expelled from the North American colony, is likely to accept the olive branch he handed out, because the weak can only resist the attack by the strong. There were only 4 colonies in North America in 1628. The first was New France with Quebec at its core. The colony had a population of about 400 to 500. The second is New England with the Massachusetts colonies and the Virginia colonies as the core. The colony's population is increasing every year, and currently there are more than 2,000 people. The third is the city of Herald, which unified the large and small tribes on Vinland Island in the late autumn of this year, and became the sole leader. This is a colony with Icelanders at its core. It is a completely independent, free and unregulated free state, because the leader of Hader was not a colonist sent by the Kingdom of Denmark. There are savages with a population of more than 10,000 on Vinland Island and a colonial population of 800. The last one is New Netherlands, which was established by Dutch colonists in the south of New England less than 4 years ago. This is the shortest time and the smallest population and location, making it the weakest colony. After Hader eliminated the leader of the Beothuk people, he became the ruler of the entire Vinland and the co-lord of the Beothuk people. After he became the ruler of Vinland, he was also thinking about how to govern Vinland and how to maintain the rule, how to deal with the nearest neighbor New France, the further neighbor New England, and the farthest neighbor New Netherlands. Through Francis de Bourbon's equal dialogue with the French governor, an attempt to establish a grammar alliance was the first diplomatic move made by Hader after he became the Lord of Vinland. Early the next morning, Francis was like Hader saying goodbye, and then led the French soldiers under him to leave Vinland in a small boat. Hader waited until Francis was gone before turning around and returning to the city. Looking at the Viking militias and thousands of Bedak slaves who were ready to go, he waved his hand and ordered them move. Hader and other 4 leaders rode horses, and nearly 1,000 Viking legions followed behind them with bullock carts full of artillery and leather goods and jade, and more than 3,000 samurai captives followed. There were more than 2,000 people in the Changhu tribe, and nearly 5,000 people were recruited by the 2,000 warriors. In consideration of the limited resources on the southeast peninsula, Hader was actually very cautious about recruiting prisoners. Now there are more than 6,000 savage slaves in Herat city, and an additional 6,000 to 7,000 would be a full 14,000. Although the entire city of Herat has suddenly become a big city of 14,000 people, although it is good, it will be winter soon. I am afraid that it will not be able to support too many people to survive the winter for a while. After all, even by sweeping away many tribes and Bakan's tribes, it's too nervous to supply more than 10,000 people for the winter because of the grain and the grain harvested in Growth City this year and other accumulated food in order to concentrate on the vigorous labor, and at the same time make the Long Lake tribe a stronghold to gather food before the winter, and even support some food in Growth City. Incidentally, to stabilize the west of Vinland, Hader appointed Blackstone as the governor of Bakan City before leaving, responsible for ruling the 1,000 warriors and 2,000 women and children left in the city of Bakans, as well as the surrounding tribes with a population of 1 or 2,000, and gathering the savages that ruled the entire West. Hader gave Blackstone 2 tasks. The first is to promote the worship of Hader's bloodline family, and to turn all savages into followers of Hader, and the second is to hide all savages around Long Lake, and then vigorously develop agricultural planting and aquaculture to provide logistics support for the city of Herat. In order to guarantee the rights of Blackstone, Hader also left 200 white wolf warriors and 10 white slave soldiers equipped with muskets, and asked them to obey Blackstone's orders. In Blackstone's gratitude and loyalty, Hader led the army to leave Long Lake and head south towards the Great Southern River. After 3 days, Hader's army arrived at the middle and lower reaches of the river, and then set up a camp to wait for the fleet to arrive. Within 2 days, the fleet appeared, and then Hader divided the Viking legions into 5 groups. One group boarded the ship with more than 800 samurai slaves. In this way, it took 11 days to go back and forth 3 times, and finally before the winter fell. As the last team, Hader returned to Herat city with 100 white slave soldiers and more than 800 samurai slaves. After returning to the city of Growth, all the 5 big boats continued to fish, kill whales, seals and sea lions as fishing boats, and store food for the winter. At the same time, all the more than 10,000 indigenous slaves in Herat city were also regrouped, and they were all integrated into the new system according to the Viking rating model, becoming the lowest level personnel. Leaders such as Hader and Hagrid held a special meeting with the 7 Or leaders to discuss the management mode of Herat village. Olaf's Viking leading, which has become more mature similar to the 8 banners system, was discussed by everyone and added some details, and then passed the implementation unanimously. A few days later, Hader, as the Lord of Herat and General Viking Raiden, ordered all personnel to be rewarded for their merits. The first big prize is that all the white slave militias and their families were granted freed status. The first 2 batches of Bedak slaves and Akismo slaves also became freed and then became free. People of all ethnic groups have the same status as Icelanders, and all free people are collectively referred to as Vikings. Every Viking owns land, houses and slaves as private property, and is protected by all Vikings, and is a member of the Viking raid who ruled Vinland. It's just that because Vinland's resources are too few at present, it must be concentrated and deployed for development. Therefore, the houses allocated to the Vikings belong to them. Although the slaves belong to them, they also belong to Vikings when needed. It must be requisitioned unconditionally, but the food is provided by General Lidang, and the owner will be compensated for damage and death. As for the fields, the Vikings only got a number. For every family of 7 to 9 people, one family can get half of the arable land of Viking, but the cultivation and harvest of the arable land must be under the unified arrangement and deployment of the Vikings. Proceed and the harvest will be distributed. However, Hader also clearly told everyone that after a year or 2, when Vinland's grain production stabilizes, it can ensure that no one goes hungry, and the land will be completely cultivated and managed by individuals. In the future, General Lidang will only follow the proportions. Collect agricultural taxes. The Vikings fully supported Hader's orders. Even the Icelanders did not raise any objections. This is because Hader has been successful and smooth since he led everyone to Vinland, which invisibly strengthened Hader's prestige. And the leadership halo makes it hard to question his decision. If Hader fails once or twice in the future, His leadership aura and majesty will slowly disappear, but with the assistance of Hudic, Jot, Olaf and others, it may be difficult for Heir to fight against the indigenous people. Failed. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, Establishment of Viking Leading System, Part 2. Viking Leading, as the name suggests, is the expeditionary regiment of the Vikings. This is the concept of the Viking nation created by Olaf imitating the American nation of later generations, or it is a concept created by imitating the Manchurians. Strictly speaking, the Vikings are actually Germanic people who refer to Scandinavia and Denmark hundreds of years ago. They mean pirates and maritime adventurers, not the name of a nation of course. Manchuria did not exist before. Jurchens, Mongolians, Koreans, and some Han people formed the Manchus. In fact, the so-called pure Manchus are just a branch of the Mongols based on their genetic blood. Similarly, the Vikings are just a merged nation created by Olaf in order to unify the many ethnic groups in Vinland. Icelanders, Scotland, England, Denmark, Norway, Sweden and even France, Germany. Many people are Germanic, but love Kismo. The Indians are of Mongolian race, and the Irish are mostly Celtic. At least Vinland now has 3 or 4 races, with different cultures, languages, and beliefs, so there is no need to integrate the concept of Vikings. Ways to integrate into one. After Olaf told Heir of his ideas, he thought for a while and agreed with the idea of creating Vikings. After this major adjustment, the 800 white people composed of Icelanders, Scots, Irish, and English people have become equal free people. The original 200 savages slaves and those who were first conquered and sent. The savages who assisted the Heir army to destroy the Long Lake tribe also became free people. There were a total of 400 families and 1,000 people. 8 out of these 1,000 people became Beducs and 2 became Akismas. The city of Grot had a population of 12,000 in the winter of 1628. Among them, there were less than 2,000 free citizens with status. These people were divided into white skin and yellow skin according to their skin color, and Icelandic and Scots according to the language. There are 6 languages: Irish, English, Akismo, and Beduk. But this winter, Lord Harald, the great leader of everyone, Heir, announced that the free people of Vinland are collectively called Vikings. They are peoples of the same status and rights. After establishing the people as Vikings in the city of Grot, nearly 9,000 Beduk slaves and 800 or 900 Akismo slaves were distributed to all Vikings by Heir, according to their status and status. The military exploits are allocated according to the size. Even the most common primitive white slave family or wild savage family acquired a male and 2 female savage slaves after becoming a Viking. As for the large and small captains and leaders, they obtained more slaves. Heir and Hudic, Hagrid, and Kadir each got 1,000 slaves. Viking Leading has been adjusted to establish a management mechanism from large to small. At present, Vinland is managed in accordance with a system of patriarchs, tribes, and slaves. Olaf actually knows very well that whether it is Manchuria 8 Banners or Viking Thunder, its essence is nothing but a slavery system. This system is actually very backward and primitive, but for Icelanders with a small population, if they want to colonize millions of people in North America, they can only adopt slavery. Following the example of time has proved to be a successful 8 Banners system, to pass the Viking Thunder. To next the contracted white slaves, Akismas, Beducs, Hurons, Crees, and other nations. And finally establish a pyramid country with Icelanders at the core and whites and indigenous nobles at the top, without conflating concepts. How can the integration of many national cultures be united for my use? As for how to govern after being defeated, that's something to say. If you don't engage in slavery, imitate the British colonial methods, establish colonies, and then continue to emigrate and develop, expand your territory, and expel natives, Vinland will soon perish because Vinland has no background, there is no support behind it. The predecessor of the United States was 16 colonies. The prosperity of the 16 colonies was due to the United Kingdom of England with a population of tens of millions. What is behind the leader of Vinland? It is completely relying on their own hands. Therefore, he can only learn from the successful person in the Far East, who is also a young man, but he imitated the Jurchen, the real haunts of the mature women, the Jurchens Korean and Mongolian haunts, the Manchurians. This set of methods: Icelanders, Icelandic white slaves, Vikings, There are many ways to colonize, but Olaf does not want to colonize. What he wants is to lay down his own land. Therefore, as leaders, Icelanders must get entangled with the indigenous people and infiltrate the indigenous people with systems, culture, religious beliefs, etc. Humans ultimately rule the North American continent and establish the foundation for rule at the same time. As for whether Viking thunder is suitable, Olaf doesn't know. He just feels that he can't develop colonization like Hagrid, the British, and the French. It is too slow and too inefficient. If the Viking thunder is not suitable, the world will expose the problem, and then just make adjustments. After all, the so-called Viking thunder is nothing but a product of the integration of the colonial system, the Eight Banners system, and the slave system by Olaf with the ancient Vikings. There are problems, the great man once said, crossing the river by feeling the stones. Olaf felt that he was the one who crossed the river. Viking Leading means Viking Expeditionary Corps and has 5 pass, ship area, under its jurisdiction, and each pass, ship area, is composed of 5 manjufen, paddle areas. Each manjufen, paddle area, governs 5 addon, living areas. Each addon manages 2 production teams, and one production team consists of 4 teams according to a team of about 10 people. A production team has a population of about 50 people, one addon is about 100 people, one manjufen is 500 people, one pasad is 2,500 people, and the last leading is 12,500 people. There are only 1,800 Vikings in Herat city, and even one pass is not enough. However, Heir, Hagrid, Olaf and others are confident that with the Barrow's white slaves, the massive increase in the number of savages and the increase in slaves of the savages, the Vikings will continue to increase. In the end, not to mention a pasad, even a thunder will soon be full. Viking raiding is the only political system for the Vinland Vikings to manage population, production, military and other matters. At present, General Raiding Heir is the first leader, and Hagrid is the district governor of Pastur. Hudik, Jot, Kadir, and Hoskilden are the rudder heads of the 4 manjufen. The population of manjufen of Hudik is at least 350 people www.uxiaspit.com, but most of them are single men. White slaves, elite selection composition among Bedak people under manjufen is addon. Olav and Olaf are still addon paddle heads, but the number of addon has increased to 19 now. Because of their special identities, Olav and Olaf each lead 2 addons. The remaining 15 addon Lihines also led 2 addons. Since Hoskild served as the leader of the higher manjufen, his addon was handed over to Kalm, and Kalm was also in control. 2 addons. The rest is managed by Karhu and Yeluji, and there are newly promoted Piku, Oris, Björn, Polly, Valatu, Val's father, Lund, Eric's father, Great Salrak, Sorak's father, Nilanhu, Halleck's father, Hilter. The real middle-level leaders in Herat city are the 15 Ors who control the 19 addons. These are all Hader's closest friends and juniors, as well as the 2 savages who are loyal to him. One is the Pico of the Akismo, and he is perfect as the Orhead for the management of addon, the Akismo. As for Oris, he was given the leadership of 100 Bedak freedmen, and the other large numbers of Bedak freedmen were divided by many addons. Note, Viking leading a system that combines production, life and political and military management similar to the 8 banners. Its composition is 4 production teams equal to 1 brigade of 50 people, the leader captain, and 2 production teams are 1 addon, the leader of the Orhead, 5 addon equals 1 manjufen, paddle area, 500 people, the leader is called the rudder head, 5 manjufen is 1 pa for 2,500 people, ship area, district chief, 5 pa is for 1 leading 12,500 people, expedition, the leader is the general. Chapter 90, Good Potato Harvest, Gratifying Output. The establishment of Viking thunder gave Heir and others the right and supreme status. At the same time, it also made the Vikings composed of vested interest groups, all ethnic groups, grateful and extremely loyal to the leader Heir. In addition to Icelanders, a small number of English white slaves, a larger number of Scottish white slaves, and the majority of Irish white slaves are the lowest in society, whether they are in their hometown or in Vinland. They have no status, no dignity, and precarious lives. In many cases, even eating a full meal is a luxury, but now because the men of the family followed the master Heir to conquer the savages, and then established meritorious services, now they have become free people with status, wealth and slaves. They all know that everything they get is based on the Viking ray of Heir. Be on top, built on the kindness of the compassionate Lord Heir, freedman of Bedak and freedom of Akismo, not to mention, The gratitude for haters' adoration is even harder to express. These free people have become Vikings. If they have the ability and make contributions, they will have the opportunity to become production team captains and even add an hours leader and other leading roles. They don't want to lose everything they have already gained, so they do their best to maintain. Hadar's rule maintains the correctness and greatness of the Viking raiden system. After a winter rain, Wenland became colder and colder, but when the Viking militia went out, rye, barley, oats, vegetables and other crops were all harvested, so there is no need to worry about the impact on the ration. Yote found after calculations that the food harvest this year plus the accumulated dried fish and meat are enough to support next spring, but everyone will be living in a tight situation. But Yote also discovered that after each adding turned over half of the harvest to the city treasury, the other addings divided the grain into each family and lived their lives carefully. It is estimated that saving a little can also survive the winter, but Olaf's adding is different from other addings. They turned in a lot of food and vegetables. This was the share required when the 7 addings were established. The rest is only enough for more than 100 people to eat for more than 2 months, which is less than the other addings. But Yote found that Olaf's adding people were all smiling. After careful observation, he found that these people had gotten a lot of potatoes and sweet potatoes in the summer of this year. Olaf was engaged in potato and sweet potato planting. At that time, Yote and others also knew that these 2 foods were edible, especially potatoes to prevent poisoning, but they did not know the output of these 2 foods, so just treated as a child fooling around, not taking it seriously. Now more than 3 months have passed, and the sweet potatoes and potatoes of nearly 5 acres of land reclaimed by Olaf on both sides of the Muskox River have ushered in a bumper harvest. These huge gains don't have to be handed in, so Olaf gave 1/3 to the 80 or 90 old people of Aden, who followed him at the earliest, and then gave 1/10 of the remaining gains to the newcomers. More than 100 people after the distribution, Olaf's 2 branches of Aden's people received dozens of pounds of potatoes and sweet potatoes, and the elderly of Aden received more than 200 pounds. These foods were enough for these families to support a winter. This made them they were all very satisfied, and took them home after thanking Olaf. After finding Olaf and asking about it, Yote learned that 5 acres of land had harvested more than 40,000 pounds of potatoes and 30,000 pounds of sweet potatoes. Although the water content is relatively high, the 70,000 pounds of ration slices should also be dried. More than 10,000 pounds, this is enough food to feed 40 to 50 people for a year. There are only more than 5,000 acres of arable land reclaimed in Herat City, but the food is full and only enough to feed 2,000 people. But now Olaf can feed 40 people with 5 acres of potatoes and sweet potatoes. Yote was shocked by a simple calculation. His scalp was numb, his heart was beating wildly, and he thought to himself, if potatoes and sweet potatoes are planted on these farmland, we don't need to worry about a famine in Wenland. More than 5,000 acres are enough to feed 45,000 people, plus the rations of dried fish, dried meat, vegetables and other foods. If used properly, it will definitely be able to feed tens of thousands of people next year. And the climate in the southern part of Wenland is pretty good. Are you afraid that you will have nothing to eat if you reclaim tens of thousands of acres? Yote, who had figured out how to solve the ration problem, was very happy to find Hader. Hader knew that his son's experimental field had a good harvest, so he ordered Olaf to divide the remaining 37,000 pounds. All potatoes and sweet potatoes were collected for public use, and then 7,000 pounds were allocated to the 1,000 Duoding people for food, and the rest was dug into a large cellar for storage. It is planned to be planted on a large scale in Wenland next spring to completely improve the troubled Vikings. People's food rations. Potatoes and sweet potatoes are rich in starch. This is one of the best foods in the world today. It has an excellent taste and can add calories. The Vikings are very satisfied after eating, and they are pleasantly surprised when they learn about this year's harvest. I have great confidence in the harvest next year. However, this year Olaf planted a bumper harvest of potatoes and sweet potatoes. Not only was the production of potatoes and sweet potatoes high, but also the soil on both sides of the river was rich in nutrients, and Olaf also fermented the dung of his Aden slaves, and then planted potatoes and sweet potatoes. After the sweet potatoes were fertilized twice, the mysterious technology of making farmyard manure from the Far East made most people sneered when they saw it. It is incomprehensible. However, this time the harvest of potatoes and sweet potatoes, Yote also asked in detail about the production and benefits of farmyard manure. He has made up his mind next spring. Farmyard manure should also be used to fertilize the land when planting. Olaf experimented with planting sweet potatoes and potatoes to solve the problem of rations that have plagued the East and the West for thousands of years. If the father grows potatoes and sweet potatoes on a large scale in Winland, a large amount of labor will be liberated while guaranteeing food rations, so that they can carry out military training and develop handicraft, processing, mining and other industries. The population rapidly develops industries, builds industries, and improves the national foundation. It is in the strongest first echelon in North America. Hader was very appreciative of Olaf's ideas. He felt that Olaf's help, it was really not an illusion that he seized Vinland and even found a nation in North America. While more than 10,000 people in Herat City were discussing the huge production of potatoes and sweet potatoes, the Arctic Ocean cold current swept across North America after November entered. The winter rain still drifted from time to time. Although the weather was cold, Hader and others were unwilling to carry it in the castle. Every day they led a full-capacity Viking militia for training and hunting. Since the former militiamen, auxiliary soldiers and even samurai have become free people, this team has been readjusted. All the white men and some of the previous savages were promoted to musketeers. www.uxiaspit.com enough to make up 300 people, and then all the muskets in Hader Fort were put into use. The remaining 700 Viaduct Vikings and Akismo Vikings were transformed into spearmen. At the same time, 50 savages and samurai slaves were selected as scouts, and 30 white men were used as artillery to cooperate with the large forces. In addition, the earliest 60 Icelanders were freed from the musketeers. 30 were captains of various sizes. 30 were Hader's guard knights. Although the horses of the entire city of Harald are now, there are only more than 40 horses, and the good varieties are less than 20 horses, but as long as you wait for 2 years, you can produce enough vehicles for more than 30 knights. While self-development, leaders such as Hader also plan to continue to use Vinland specialties such as fur, royal jelly, and wine to exchange for wealth in Europe next spring, and once again buy large quantities of arms and equipment, white slaves, and livestock. With the support of the huge savage slaves of Vinland, there are endless furs, grapes, maple sugar, cod, whales and other resources that can be plundered, and there is a vast land to cultivate. Everyone thinks that it may not be possible to build Vinland in 5 or 6 years. Become a capital no worse than Iceland. Half a month after Hader unified Vinland and returned to the city in triumph, another rain in early winter turned into snowflakes and hail after 2 hours, slowly covering the mountain plains of Vinland with white yarn. This time the cold air was very strong, and the rain and snow did not stop until the third afternoon. Then the temperature in Grot City dropped greatly from before. Although the ice and snow on the land slowly melted under the sun, Olaf he could feel that the air temperature was close to zero. He breathed a sigh of relief, then closed the wooden window of his room, and sighed. This year's severe winter has come, and it may be even colder than last year. Chapter 91, Champlain and Number 039, S Reaction. On November 25th, 2 days of ice and snow covered North America, causing the Hurons, Abenaki and Cree people living in the vicinity of the St. Lawrence River estuary to hide in the tribe's wooden huts to avoid the cold. Champlain, who wanted to place his hopes on the Huron allies, and hoped to get some food from the Huron or Abenaki, was disrupted by this heavy snow. In such weather, he could not send anyone to find the indigenous people. It is impossible for the indigenous people to bring food for them. Not only the environment does not allow it, but also the indigenous people will regard food as more precious after the heavy snowfall. There is a French-style villa with stone walls and wood roof in the citadel of Quebec. The chimney is steaming black, indicating that someone has lit the fireplace for heating. This is the residence of Champlain, the governor of New France, and it is also the power center of New France. In the house, Champlain was wearing a sweater and his beard on his lips was neatly constructed. He sat by the fireplace and looked at the letter in his hand. After a while, he coughed and said, "Ali." Add another handful of firewood. Why? Still a little cold. His lover, Ali, who followed him by the side, is a charming woman in her 30s. She chuckled and put some firewood into the fireplace. "Your body is not as good as before." Hearing the faint voice of his lover, Champlain coughed slightly, thinking that he was becoming more and more powerless in bed, and said with a blushing face and breath, "I am almost 50 years old. I have been exploring the North American wasteland all the year round and can live. God bless you. You need to know how strong I was when I was young?" Ali chuckled and said, "Yes, my strong governor general." Shrug. Champlain read the letter again, and then tightened his clothes. As if it felt warmer, Champlain pondered the bad news that Francis's urgent request and the letter stated that the Gaspé Peninsula has caused a large number of deaths of indigenous people due to this year's cooling. If a large number of indigenous people on the peninsula's strongholds are guaranteed to die, hunting and fishing will not be guaranteed next year. When the amount of supplies harvested, Francis and his French soldiers could not even beat a fox at all. French soldiers are not as versatile as the Icelanders. They don't understand hunting and fishing skills at all. Therefore, if they don't rely on savage allies, they will not be able to obtain enough prey to supply the consumption of strongholds in Quebec because of the harsh living environment. Icelanders are very proficient in hunting, fishing, sailing and steering and many other skills. Basically every Icelander masters 2 skills, which are inherited by ancestors, but the French are different. They are an agricultural country. Most of the farmers only know how to farm the land. Those who are mercenaries only know how to fight. There are not many fishermen by the sea, so the Kingdom of France with a population of 10 million really depends on fisheries. Instead, there are only 1 or 2 Basques in the region. Champlain clearly knows that if you lose the help of the natives' allies, it will be impossible for the French to survive in North America. Putting away the letter, Champlain frowned and fell into thought. Ally noticed the emotional change of her lover, sat next to Champlain, hugged him and asked, "My dear, what did Francis tell you again?" "What else? Except for persuading me to form an alliance with the Icelanders on Vinland Island, he won't have any new tricks now." "Humph," Champlain said coldly. "Last month he lost to the Icelanders, and heir led him back. The first thing he saw me was to persuade me to form an alliance with Vinland. I think this kid has been brainwashed by the Icelanders." "Oh," Ali nodded and asked, "but before you said that the English people are pressing harder and harder, maybe it is a good thing to form an alliance with the Icelanders in Vinland?" "Why? The Icelanders on Vinland Island are not kind people. They ruled and enslaved the Beatles, and they had great ambitions to occupy Vinland Island. Now the English people want to drive me away. I think even I temporarily retreat. The British without the foundations still can't rule here, but the Icelanders are different. Their style is to enslave the indigenous people to rule. Compared with the English, they are more direct and violent. If I ally with them, they will have it may be possible to use my power to ascend to New France, and then annex the natives on the North American continent and occupy the separatist land. The English are wolves and the Icelanders are leopards." Champlain seems to have been well thought out. He is very worried about the Icelanders' ambitions. In order not to attract wolves into the house, he has always refused to respond to Francis's strategy of alliance with the Icelanders. "Since you don't want to ally with the Icelanders, why don't you ask for domestic support? You are the governor appointed by Prime Minister Richelieu, and he will never ignore the embarrassment of New France." Champlain has never married a wife and set up a family. Ali has been with him for 4 or 5 years. He has been in and out of the halls of higher-ranking officials and aristocrats and met with many celebrities. She also has a certain political perspective, so she made suggestions to Champlain. Champlain waved his hand, frowned and said, "Prime Minister Richelieu may be powerless and unwilling to support me. What's happening, hey?" Prime Minister Richelieu tried his best to promote the anti-Habsburg alliance of Britain, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark 3 years ago. Then the 3 countries funded the alliance and Denmark sent troops to attack. At first, Denmark's fight was pretty good, but since last year, Christian IV has been retreating steadily, and the British Commander-in-Chief Mansfield has also been defeated. Now Denmark has been beaten back to northern Jutland, and the Habsburg army has no one to check and balance. Richelieu is actively looking for other forces that can be wooed, and also to guard against Spanish invasion. After all, Spain and Habsburg are one family. Champlain sighed, got up and turned around, and then said, "I have ordered Francis to try to ensure Quebec supplies on the Gaspé Peninsula. He has more than 100 musketeers and Huron warriors. Assuring logistics, this winter will be a bit harder than before, but it will be able to survive. When the weather gets warmer next spring, I will try to negotiate with the British. As long as the conditions are not too harsh, I think I can always discuss it." Champlain didn't know whether his decision was correct, but he was learning about Francis's 180 French soldiers, 500 Huron warriors, and 3,000 Beothuk warriors. After losing to the Icelanders, and the Icelanders still have artillery, muskets, plate armor and other weapons, Champlain is deeply afraid of the Icelanders. Champlain thinks that such a well-prepared colonist must not just be satisfied with scouring the fur. They must have ambitions for the population of the territory. Champlain does not want to provoke the Icelanders. He even questioned himself in his heart why he hadn't discovered Iceland a few years ago. Are people hiding so deep? He even maintained a general friendship with the previous leader Hagrid because Champlain was worried that his alliance with Vinland would give them a chance to enter the mainland and compete with the English for territories. He still disagreed with Francis's proposal of alliance, even if he faced the risk of enduring hunger in his stronghold. I saw in the letter that this right-hand man had some opinions on himself. Reached out and touched the fire, feeling warmth and a slight tingling. Champlain coughed slightly, and then muttered to himself, "Wait and wait, Francis, you are too young and young, you don't understand. The Icelandic leader who is kind and courteous to you actually has the ambition to dominate North America. Unless we can't support it, we can't form an alliance with the Icelanders because, in case of an alliance with Vinland, the Icelanders will have enough reasons to do so. I am involved in the affairs of the mainland, and North America will fall into chaotic wars in the future, and the worst result may be even more chaotic and fierce than the current All-European Union war. This is not on the interests of New France, and it is not good for me." Rule. Chapter 92, New England Colonists and Number 039, Reaction. New England is a colony established by the British on the east coast of North America. The Virginia Company of London was established in 1606 and then colonized in Virginia on the south of the east coast. However, this earliest colony has been developing tepidly and even faced extinction many times. Risks of later. After the Mayflower arrived in North America in 1620, the Puritans and the Plymouth Company jointly established a Plymouth colony in the north, allowing this land named New England in 1614 to truly encompass the territory of the United Kingdom, which also marked the rising period of British colonialism in North America. Began from 1620 to 1628. Almost every year, the Plymouth Company and its cooperative Creek Company would trick a large number of white slaves into New England to build colonies in England, Scotland, and Ireland. Due to the harsh environment and the Aboriginal people they encountered were too fierce. In addition, the colonial companies in New England did not treat the white slaves as human beings and forced them to squeeze. As a result, New England had immigrated to nearly 6,000 people for many years, but as of the winter of 1628, only more than 2,000 people survived. After several years of development, the Plymouth colony has built churches, council halls, and hundreds of houses. Outside the colony are low walls and fences, and beyond is the vast land that has been cultivated. Since New England is controlled by the Puritans, it did not accept the intention of sending a governor from the English company. Instead, it set up a parliament to manage the colony and was coordinated and managed by the Puritan leader, Reverend Brest. Of course, it also sent a governor to the Plymouth Company. A governor, William Bradford, was appointed to manage the trade. Brest escaped to the New World because his religious claims failed to get the attention and promotion. The Puritans were also a part of Protestantism, but they opposed to the royal power advocated by King James I of England, except for God. The political proposition of the king is the most noble, and opposing the British king's ambition and domineering behavior of church land, it can be said that the Puritans have gone against the British King James I. However, the attitude and skill of the King of England were very tough, which made the traditional aristocrats, Catholics, and Puritans of Ireland, Scotland and even the England team disgusted. This also paved the way for James I's son Charles I to go to the guillotine decades later. Brest was a Puritan priest. He led the Puritans to manage the immigration of Plymouth and tried to preach to the native savages, but at first their arrogant preaching attitude suffered a lot, and has been supplemented by a large number of white slaves in the UK in recent years. Only then did they have strong power, quickly expanded the colony, and began to enslave the natives. The power of New England has grown, and the leaders of the Puritans such as Bristol are in the neighbor of New France in the north. The European continent is now undergoing a 30-year war that is sweeping the world. The Puritans do not care about France but also stand on the side of the Protestant Union. They have no good impressions of Catholic France, because the Native Americans are all non-believers, and the French occupied North America. They have mastered the right of belief of the indigenous people in New France. The Puritans such as Brest wanted to become saints like Sao Paulo. Although they were Protestant believers, they did not prevent them from working hard for the introduction of Christianity into the New World. They also wanted to make the natives of the New World believe in the Protestantism of the Clean School. They are all the founders of the mountain. Brest began to vigorously target New France this year, but in the early winter, he was shocked by the news that the Icelanders unified Vinland Island and surrendered to all the indigenous people on the island, And what is even more shocking is that the Icelandic army defeated the soldiers of New France. Brest has never considered the Icelanders of Vinland. First of all, the Icelanders also converted to Protestant Lutheranism, which is considered to be a different ancestry from New England. They are closer than New France, and the Icelanders behave. He has always been good, and he is very honest, which makes New England always treat Wendland as a little brother, but now the little brother suddenly became the big brother, a strong man who pressed France to the ground violently. Brest was a little unacceptable for a while, so he asked the crew of the Creek Company to collect information about the Vinland Icelanders as soon as possible. Information. 10 days later, after reading a large stack of materials, he rubbed his sour eyes and called more than 40 congressmen, and then held a special meeting on Vinland and New France. At the meeting, Brest first informed the situation of the Battle of Wendland, and then explained that the city of Wendland has thousands of soldiers and thousands of savages, muskets, plate armor, artillery, and armed warships. Information. Looking around for the last week, everyone was very surprised and shook their heads and said, "Friends, we all ignored the Icelanders on Vinland Island. We did not expect that they came to North America in the same year as us, but they quickly grew up in front of our eyes. A powerful force. It is conceivable that the Icelandic leader Hagrid and his successor leader Heir are both natural leaders. Hey. Yet, we came to the northern continent at the same time, but over the years we have killed more than half of the white slaves, but only got less than half of the land of Icelanders," the young pastor said with emotion. "Huh? In order to help them order the fishermen in England not to go ashore to harass Vinland, they developed so well but did not return us? What a shame. Why not ask Governor William to threaten some Icelanders with an armed merchant ship?" A hooked-nosed the middle-aged man said coldly. The young pastor sneered and said, "Mr. Miller, when we did not allow English fishermen to land in Vinland, we actually wanted to use Vinland's Icelanders to contain New France, and at the same time draw English fishermen to us and provide us with some fish and flesh. Honesty is the most basic character of a person. We are all believers of the Lord, not hateful politicians, so Mr. Miller is asked not to deceive ourselves. Moreover, Governor William has always wanted to extend the power to the colony and rule immigrants on behalf of our parliament. Do you want to lead a wolf into the room, huh? Of course I don't want our council to lose power. But Pastor McGonagall, do you think you are noble?" Miller asked with staring eyes. Miller was a member of the parliament and a Puritan, but he was very vicious to the white slaves, which made many benevolent members uncomfortable, but only the young Pastor McGonagall dared to speak against him. Seeing that the two were about to quarrel again, Brest frowned and waved his hand. "Shut up. Don't engage in unnecessary quarrels. Friends, we are now discussing how to treat Vinland's hero in the future. Special City and New France. Do we join forces with the Growth City to completely drive away the French, or continue to maintain a cold friendship with the Icelanders?" Dozens of parliamentarians started discussing, and their opinions gradually became clear after half a day, and two voices appeared on the venue. One is a hardliner headed by Miller, and one is a moderate headed by Pastor McGonagall. The hardliners believe that there is no support from the Kingdom of Denmark behind the city of Groot, and they have just offended France. New England can suspend the persecution of New France and lure New France and Vinland into a fight and consumption, and wait until Vinland is weakened to a certain extent. To mediate, or to annex the two, or to support the Icelanders, so that New England has the dominance in initiative. Miller's opinions occupies a considerable market. More than half of the more than 40 congressmen agreed with Miller's opinions, which made him very proud and even smiled provocatively at McGonagall. McGonagall's opinion is that everything is based on the opinions of the Puritans. In North America, where there are indigenous people, we must unite with hard-won fellows. Icelanders believe in Lutheranism, which is essentially the same as the Puritans. Great. If the two families unite to spread the gospel to the indigenous people, maybe everyone will see Protestantism bloom and bear fruit in the wild in their lifetime, and finally realize everyone's religious pursuits and political ambitions. If you watch the battle between New France and Vinland, perhaps as soon as the All-European War is over, New France will free up against Vinland. If Vinland is annexed and destroyed by New France a few years later, the interests of New England will be difficult to protect. Catholicism and Christianity. The battle in the New World will continue. When the two sides were in a quarrel, Brest seemed to have a tendency. He clapped his hands to stop everyone's argument, and then said, "I think we still have to keep our original plans and propositions. If New France is expelled from the New World after we take over the bases in Quebec, we will not only be able to grasp the source of fur goods and a large amount of wealth, but also use Quebec as a bridgehead to go deep into the hinterland to spread the gospel and look for the Far East Celis, China. I think Pastor McGonagall is right. We must stick to our proposition. The Catholic French is not credible. We should deepen relations with the Icelanders, drive out New France together, and then divide up their colony. After speaking, Brest realized that Miller had to persuade himself, so he added, I know Miller's concerns. You are worried that the Icelanders will threaten us after the disappearance of New France, but you have to know that in the European War, Denmark is about to face defeat. It is impossible for Icelanders to find Danish support, but we can seek support from England through the London Company. In the long run, united wild dogs strangled a juvenile lion. It's a bargain, but we are also a juvenile lion. You said that when the lion grows up, will the wild dog of New France still be a threat? But if the underage northern lion grows up, we will regret it later. And you have to know that even if we jointly expelled the French, New France will definitely make a comeback in the future. At that time, Vinland at the mouth of the St. Lawrence will be our shield. After Brest explained, Miller and others suddenly realized, and then admired the old pastor's foresight. Brest waved his hand. He knew that the temperature was about to cool down completely, so many things could only be done until next spring. After thinking for a moment, he immediately ordered McGonagall to send someone to contact the Icelanders in Herat City, and try to find a chance to meet with Heir, the head of Vinland. After the beginning of the spring, when the congressmen dispersed, Brest stopped McGonagall, who was leaving, took him to sit in the corner, and asked, Do you understand me, McGonagall? McGonagall admired, Teacher, you really think about the long term. You don't need to say. Brest interrupted McGonagall's words and coughed slightly. I am 55 years old this year. And my energy and physical strength are getting worse and worse. If I can't seize the opportunity to expel New France and occupy Quebec, maybe it is impossible for me to go deep into the hinterland of the New World to preach before I die. You must remember that we are the Lamb of the Lord and the faithful dog that herds the Lord. We are not ugly colonists. We only know how to seek money. We also need to establish church heritage in this vast land and become prophets. Yes, I understand. McGonagall stood up and said with a solemn face, www.wuxiaspit.com. In order to drive away New France as soon as possible, I personally went to Wenland. Miller returned to his home with a few cronies and drank a glass of wine, and then discussed the matter. After hearing a congressman praise Brest's political vision, he snorted and said, Priests, they are all idealists. They only think about preaching, but they don't know if Icelanders have ambitions for mainland land. We will only become their vassals. We will even be expelled, isn't it? Brest said that the French will not be reconciled? And we can seek support from England, a member of the parliament questioned. Humph, Miller sighed and sneered. The intervention of French and British forces is based on the victory of the All-European War Protestant League. What if it doesn't win? What if it will drag on for 10 or 20 years? You mean, if the Icelanders are caught in the quagmire of the war between Britain and France and cannot help us to expel us and annex us when we wait, do you think we have the power to fight back? I am afraid that the strong Icelanders who already have an army will not be easily satisfied. Hey, we can ask the London Company to increase immigration. As long as the population of New England continues to increase, we will soon surpass Iceland. Yes, I'm already applying for London to increase immigration. Brest is also unified and recognized, and Governor William is already doing it, but I think it's time to talk to Governor William again. It's, note, Sayers, another name for China. Before the exploration of the North American continent was completed in the 17th century, Europeans generally believed that India, China, and the North American continent were connected, and that the way to China could be found from North America. Chapter 93, Tenjin Kazuta Dog. Vinland's winter is unusually cold, but it's commonplace for Icelanders. It is the poorest Bietak slaves who really can't stand the cold, but this year Heir allowed them to chop wood for the winter by December. This kind act made the slaves all cheer and be grateful. This is because at the end of November, the second phase of the Herat City project just ended. At the beginning, the progress of Herat City was not fast, but with enough white slaves brought back this year, the white slaves were far more capable of construction than the native slaves, and there were still many people who could make tools. The construction speed has been greatly increased, and the frame structure of Growth City was finally completed before the new year. Thousands of slaves and Vikings worked day and night to mine stone, cut wood, and build houses, walls and other buildings. Now the city of Herat has built an urban area comparable to the area of Reykjavik, Iceland. Simple, but the framework has been erected, and houses are lined up, and the drainage canals and gravel roads in front of the houses are in order now. In addition to Hader Fort in the center of the city, there is a newly built military fort on the east side for military arrangements and armament storage. On the west side, there is a 2-story Nordic-style building that manages Vinland slaves and freedom. The government that discusses things such as people's production and life this year, due to the addition of a large number of craftsmen white slaves, small, medium, and even large tools in the city of Groot have been produced to assist in the construction of the city-state. Hader thinks that the third phase of the construction will be completed next year, and finally this colony will become more and more. It's more and more like a city under the leadership of the white slave craftsmen. The savage slaves also exploded out of efficiency and productivity that far exceeded the previous ones. The level of the city of Groot has been improved by more than 3 times compared with the previous one. It only took 1 year to compare with last year's progress. Quadruple, because the city-state of Heart City, which is enough to accommodate 2,000 to 3,000 people, was built according to the division of the north and the inside, and even the outer city and the city wall were completed. Hader was very pleased to order all adding and slaves to rest until next spring to work, while temporarily allowing savages slaves to enjoy the same logging rights as the Vikings, and then allocated a piece of land in the northern Avalon wetland to supply slaves for themselves. Cut firewood for heating in the winter. In fact, Hader also planned to build some gravel roads around the city of Groot, but there are too many things to do, and the labor force under him seems a little nervous, and there is not much benefit in building roads, so he just uses the construction of houses. The remaining stones pave the inner city streets. In a forest northwest of Avalon, dozens of slaves cut down trees on their own. These people are the servants of the Viking masters. They dare not rob the slaves of the town master, commander, and oarsmen to the safest and most peaceful places in the east and the south. The woods were cut in the wooded places. They knew that their Viking master's status was only a freedman. The status of their slaves was naturally lower. So they had to go to the relatively remote northwestern forest to log. In the quiet forest, there are only dull sounds of logging, such as bumping tuk-tuk. The Bedak slaves are used to being cautious in words and deeds, obedient, especially when they see people of the same race being treated for brave fighting and active performance. Given the identity of the Vikings, they became more motivated and worked harder. Time passed bit by bit, and soon the sun went down. Many Bedak slaves hundreds of pounds of firewood with the ropes twisted from bark, and then carried on their backs and walked to the city of Groot in the south. In the end, there were only 2 savages left in the forest. They were both 16 or 17 years old. Each of them had a bundle of firewood long ago, but they still insisted on cutting down the tree, preparing to chop another small bundle. These 2 aboriginals were both young men captured by Hagrid in the south. They survived because they were too young to be warriors. They all unified their minds, prepared to collect more firewood, and then went after 1 or 2 young girls or widows who were widowed. People are approaching adulthood, always thinking about getting married and having children. 8 wolves, you're going to be faster. I have cut enough. I guess we can give Adaya and Monique 20 bundles of firewood. They will marry us, because the indigenous people are the poorest. They only wear reindeer furs even in winter. Seals, beavers, and even squirrels and foxes have no status and conditions to wear the reindeer leather clothing worn by a taller teenager. Has some hair loss, but others cherishly took out a small piece of deerskin from his arms and put it on his shoulders, and then carried 2 bundles of firewood. Another shorter teenager also swiftly the firewood, then carried 2 bundles in one breath, bent over and panted and said, "Kickip, I'm fine, let's go." 2 thin bodies, carrying nearly 200 pounds of wood, hobbled around on the grass. After a while, they would rest on the tree for a while, and then the 2 would gossiping to relieve fatigue and shoulder pain. 8 wolves, what are you going to do after you marry Aditya? I want to have 2 children, and then I will fight to join a samurai group and fight against a quartet for the gods. In the future, I will be able to turn both Adaya and my children into the Viking masters. The small 8 wolf spoke with longing, and then he looked at Kickip. Where are you? Of course I also want to be a samurai of the gods, and I will have the opportunity to become a Viking in the future. Then let's work hard together. By the way, I heard that the Akismus and people from other tribes who used to follow the gods huddle together in the cave in winter, and many people freeze to death every year. We compare them, but it's much better. Lord Shianshan gave us land and houses, and allowed us to cut down wood for the winter. We also have dried fish given by the gods as meat for the winter. I think this winter will be much better than before in the tribe. Yes. The tall and stalwart gods are extremely brave, but they are also extremely kind. The two praised Hader a few words, and then they continued on their way this year, due to the increase in the population of the city of Herat. The white wolves on the peninsula were removed several times and more than 300 were killed. The beasts on the peninsula were almost wiped out, and the slaves had never suffered. Assault two good friends only saw the city of Herat after dark. Since Hader agreed with Vinland for more than a month, he no longer imposed strict controls on the savage slaves, and none of them would run away, so the 8 wolves and when Karp returned to Herat city, he was only let go after being questioned by the 2 white wolf warriors who had become Vikings. The houses of the 2 were built side by side. When they were about to say goodbye to home, they saw the light from the windows of the tall fortress in the middle of the inner city in the distance. www.uxiaspit.com. They knew that it was the god of Hader and the lords. At the banquet, looking enviously for a while, Kikipu suddenly leaned over to the ears of the 8 wolves and smiled and asked, 8 wolves, do you say that Hader is the of heaven? If he is not the of heaven, I might be more loyal. 8 wolves jumped in their heart. Frightened Liashan was who hurriedly pulled Kikip down, and whispered, are you crazy? Dare to question the gods? Kikip casually uttered a sentence because he envied the life of Hader and others. He regretted it when he said it, but when he saw the appearance of the 8 wolves, he felt a breath of anger in his heart, and said in a low voice, I think Hadarsson god only possesses the blood of her and not necessarily a real god, otherwise, why wouldn't he really call for the wind and rain? I have long heard that the White Vikings use weapons called muskets to control the fires, which are not supernatural powers. You nonsense. The 8 wolves frowned, pressing down Kikip and snarled, how can it be that the gods have such a stalwart and tall body? And he led Hagrid gods and chief Fudic and chief cattle to ride. The attack on horses made the warriors of Bacon's Long Lake defeated. What is the divine power? In order to create Hader's image as a god, the city of Herat deliberately exaggerated Hader's performance and role on the battlefield. Indigenous people are brainwashed. Yes, it must be. Kikip's intestines were all regretful. He patted his mouth severely, and then said, I'm nonsense. After talking about Kikip and ran away, while escaping Kikip, he explained in his heart, I am not blasphemy, I just said that if Hader is not a god, I will still be his loyal dog, because he is smarter, merciful, and greater than any chief. Only by following Hader can we become superior Vikings. Chapter 94, Messenger. After the time entered December, it became more and more cold, and the weather was gloomy, and it seemed that another heavy snow was brewing. The family that has been idle recently plays a card game invented by Olaf in the castle every day. It is called Usinging. It is actually the landlord of playing cards, but Olaf has changed the term. This new and interesting card game is not only liked by Hader, Katrin, Olav, Haf, Gurney, but also by Hagrid, Hudic, Heine and others. After contact after breakfast every day, the hall on the first floor of the castle is full of people. Many leaders and oars lead their families to play cards and drink in the castle, making the warm castle that was already roasted by the bonfire warmer. It can be said that after winter, the lights of Heidelberg will be bright every day until midnight. In addition to playing cards with his mother, brother and others, Olaf writes plans after next spring. He feels that Vinland is now unified and a large population is concentrated in Herat. Next year, as long as the ration is guaranteed by planting potatoes and sweet potatoes, slaves can be used to develop handicrafts such as mining and even shipbuilding. Of course, the premise is that skilled workers and equipment and technicians can be sold in Europe. Next year. Olaf remembers that later generations read a map of the distribution of minerals in North America in the National Library. He now has forgotten the distribution of other minerals, but he remembers the distribution of coal mines and iron ore. He knows the new distribution of the later generations in the south of Woodland Island. There are coal mines and iron ore mines on the peninsula of Scotia province, and the reserves of coal mines are very good. There are also iron ore, lead zinc mines and even copper mines on Vinland Island. However, except for lead zinc mines, other mineral reserves are not large. Therefore, Olaf plans to bring people from Europe to Vinland next year. Not only is Labanu, but also professionals in various fields such as shipbuilders and mining exploration and mining. With iron ore coal mines, iron smelting and even in the production of weapons and equipment, Vinland wants to truly stand firm by developing its population and heavy industry. Without these two things, it will not be able to defend the island. Sooner or later, it will be taken away by the British, let alone expand to the western mainland. In addition to the development of mining, steel and other industries, as well as shipbuilding, Olaf is also thinking about the business he agreed with Koichi last year. He asked Kui Yi, who is an official in Batavia, a colony of the Dutch East India Company, to buy some porcelain and Chinese medicine, and most importantly, Li Shizhen's Compendium of Materia Medica, Suquanqi's Nongzhengquanshu, and Song Yingxing. The 3 books' heavenly creations, which are the basic classics and guiding principles used by Olaf to develop light industry, heavy industry and agriculture. Olaf knows how many caddies he is, and if he wants to treat Wendland as a country's development, he cannot rely on the wisdom of the working people of the heavenly kingdom for thousands of years. Olaf wrote down on the paper what he was going to do next year with charcoal, lest he forget it. At the same time, he planned to let his 2 Vikings and slaves from Aden make maple syrup in the spring of next year. After all, there is no industry now. So if you want to make a fortune, you can only rely on the sugar industry, which is unique in North American resources. Originally, Olaf wanted to find a suitable area on the southern coast of Groote City to open up salt pans for drying salt, which would not only solve the problem of Wendland eating salt, but also add a commodity. However, Wendland's climate is very weak, perhaps due to the influence of the Little Ice Age. In summer, Wendland is not too hot. The efficiency of salt drying is not good, and it is troublesome to open up a salt field. Olaf mentioned once that Hader was not interested. The matter of drying salt will be shelved indefinitely. Although Hader is not interested in the salt industry, he has already been gearing up for other industries. Hader and Hudik, Hagrid, Yada and others have also planned. Next spring, everyone will be mobilized. The samurai and militia will continue their wolf hunting and hunting activities in late autumn and early winter, and continue to hoard a large amount of animal skins. The subjects and slaves were all mobilized and transported by ship to various areas of the island looking for maple sap to make sugar, and strive to get the 6 ships and the fleet going to Barrow next spring, each of which must be loaded with royal jelly and precious goods such as animal skins. Today, Hader was lucky. He grabbed the mountain spirit 3 times in a row, and won 3 times with a good card. Suddenly Yacht walked in from outside, and there were a few melting snowflakes on his cloak. What's happening? When Hader saw Yacht's expression, he knew there was something, and the weight was not light, so he hurriedly got up and asked. Yacht pointed to the outside and said, "An Englishman came just now. He said he was a messenger sent by Elder Breister, the chief of Plymouth on the southwest coast. I wanted to meet you. I just asked some questions. It should be talked to us about cooperation or alliances. Maybe they heard that we defeated the army of New France, so they are interested in saying good. Let's see him in the East Chamber, Piku." Go and take the Englishman at the door to the East Chamber. Without thinking, Hader pulled up Yacht to the chamber just east of the hall's outer corridor, and greeted him at the same time. Piccolo went and brought in the British messenger. Olaf saw the situation, threw the card in his hand to Tom to play, and then quickly followed Father, Uncle Yacht. What's wrong? When Olaf walked to the East Chamber, Hader and Yacht were already seated at the round table. Olaf, you sit next to me. Hader waited until Olaf sat down and briefly explained the situation. Olaf nodded and said, "Father, you said before that Francis sent you 2 letters, and both said yes. The governor of New France, Champlain, has a vague attitude. He has no intention of forming an alliance with England. Now the leader of New England has sent some people. I think whether it is New France or New England, the attitude towards us seems strange." Yeah, Hader touched his beard and shook his head. "It stands to reason that Champlain has been forced by the British to run out of food. It is harmless to make an alliance with us. What is he hesitating? New England sends someone here. Maybe it is to test our attitude. After all, they must have known that I unified Vinland and that we defeated the army of New France." Olaf and Yad couldn't understand. The door creaked open in their thoughts, and Piku, the paddlehead of Aden, the Kismo, was still bent over like a servant with a thin man in a wolf fur coat walking master. "The guest is here." You reading www.uucanchu.com. Piku, who had just started to wear a beard, bowed and stood behind Olaf. Although Piku made the Aden paddlehead and also possessed the status of a free citizen, he still lives in Hatterborg and takes himself as Olaf's servant. This is what the Hader family like very much. The messenger took off his hat and showed his handsome features. He looked very young, bowed to Hader, and then squeezed a smile and said in a standard London accent, "Your Excellency Mr. Hader. I am Pastor McGonagall in Plymouth. Come to see Mr. Hader on the order of Elder Brest. Please sit down." Hader smiled and got up to shake hands with McGonagall, and then asked him to sit down opposite. The 2 parties said something, and then Hader felt McGonagall's kindness, and then McGonagall got up and solemnly sent him the letter from Elder Breast. Hader opened it up, and it was all polite and humble. Regards, knowing the key things still hurts, McGonagall said. Hader put away the letter, looked at McGonagall with a smile, and asked, "Thank you for your greetings from Elder Breast. Pastor McGonagall, please greet him on my behalf when you go back." McGonagall. "Pastor Jack, you braved the ice and snow. Are there other things?" McGonagall smiled and said, "I am here on behalf of Elder Breast. In addition to greeting your excellency, I also have a mission. I hope that Wenland and New England can establish a friendship behind them. Although we are far in the south, we still have a mission. I heard that Champlain of New France sent soldiers to attack you and invaded Vinland. The elder condemned Champlain's heinous behavior and is willing to stand with you. Now the battle between the European Protestant League and the Catholic League is in full swing. We are all members of Protestantism. Even as far away as North America, we should unite to drive out the French who believe in outdated and decadent doctrines." Chapter 95. 3 feet standing is the balance. After some persuasion from Pastor McGonagall, Hader said he was very excited, but did not express his opinion. After inviting Pastor McGonagall to have lunch, Hader took advantage of the lunch break and gathered leaders of Olaf, Jot, Hagrid, Olav, Kadir, and Hoskard to discuss, knowing that New England will form an alliance with Vinland and expel the French to split New France. Olaf's heart jumped and found this proposal very attractive. Hagrid and Kadir all laughed, feeling that they had shown their power, and even the British had come to seek alliances, and they all agreed to the proposal of the New England leader. Most of the leaders, such as the Paddlehead and Rudderhead, are not good at political work. The most proficient in matters such as fighting, farming, fishing, etc., so not many people can express their opinions. After 3 or 4 people agreed, Hader looked at Heine and asked, "What is your opinion?" Heine squeezed his chin for a moment, and said, "The English people are never kind and benevolent. Potter, god of light. They are cunning and changeable, insidious and vicious. My manor was robbed by the English. I am very know the hatefulness of the English. The Elder Breast of Plymouth, I have never heard of his reputation before, so I don't know if he really wants to unite with us, but we jointly expelled the French with him. For the time being, we will definitely get great gains because of habit, and the Hurons traded by the French will turn to trade with us, and we will get more for resources." "You mean temporarily?" Hudic repeated, the scar on the corner of his eye. "Yes," Heine nodded and continued, "we have established a friendship with Francis, the second person in New France, and there is no contradiction with the governor of Champlain. I don't think we need to offend them if they find it in France. With the support of the sponsor or the government, I think we will be very passive in the future. Whether it is dealing with them or getting into war, it will be a loss to us." The long scene of Heine's words cooled down, and Hader looked at Olav. Although Olav is 23 years old, he has only attended a mission school. He followed his uncle for 8 years after his youth, so he is not good at brains, but he has heard the opinions of everyone. "Some thoughts," he said slowly. "I think Heine is right. Even if we are to join forces with the British, it shouldn't be now, because we have only unified Vinland this year, and most of our energy should be placed on the development of literature. On the land of Lan, if we have abundant resources and sufficient forage soldiers in a few years, I think it's no problem to deal with the French or the British." Hader's own inner thoughts were actually close to those of Olav, but now he wanted to hear the last person's thoughts, so he looked at Olaf. Olaf felt everyone's eyes, tapped his fingers on the table, and said, "I think Big Brother and Heine are right. We don't need to offend the French for business, not to mention the fact that New France is behind it. A strong France, just for the friendship of Francis. We must also have a good relationship with New France. Champlain did not intend to form an alliance with us, which shows that he knows that our strength threatens him. If we are strong and have a deep foundation, we can naturally invade the mainland and occupy New France and even New England, but our population resources are far from enough. The best choice for us at present is to maintain a three-legged situation, that is, the three forces of Vinland, New France, and New England coexist in North America. After all, there are still many undeveloped places in the New World. We should guide them to go deep into the mainland instead of fighting each other." Olaf's words made Hader's attitude firm, and then he got up and took Hagrid and the others to reject McGonagall's request, but it also showed that they only wanted to operate in Vinland and were willing to maintain a friendly relationship with New England. McGonagall left Harry with a greeting letter written by Hader to Elder Breast. He knew that relying on Icelanders would not be possible, and he had to rely on himself to expel Champlain. Olaf opened the window and looked at the snow falling in the sky and the wet mud outside, knowing that it hadn't been long before the snow fell in his vision. McGonagall and his two servants rode on horses and disappeared gradually. Olaf just knew that the current leader of New England was a Puritan, and he thought of a certain possibility: the story of the Mayflower's arrival in the New World and the establishment of a colony. Olaf has heard 3 or 4 versions in his previous life. McGonagall and Brest are the people who took the Mayflower. The Thanksgiving Day in later generations originated from the festival created by the people of Brest to commemorate the Indians who reached out to them and helped them through the famine. Although they and their descendants killed the Indians from knots oft, but 1 yard goes to 1 yard. When eating turkey, everyone will still think of the kind Indians in their hearts for a second. Olaf remembered that although New England was initially managed by the Puritans, after Quebec City was occupied by them, the Puritan team gradually split, and then the leadership was diluted by a new group of colonial manor and wealthy people sent by the London Company. Status, and then appeared the New England governor with greater power, took over all the rights of the governor of Plymouth. New England then became a completely aggressive colony. Olaf knows very well that the British will establish 16 colonies in North America in more than 100 years, and then expel the French to establish the United States of America, and eventually become the hegemon of the world, so his heart is actually the most guarded by the British. Olaf felt that New England would probably be better than a gangster-like governor if it had been led by the Puritans. After all, neither Elder Brest nor Pastor McGonagall reported their ambitions for Vinland and other North American lands. They expelled France. People are not just for fur, but also want to monopolize the vast and primitive missionary area. Olaf is not afraid of religious elements who have ideals and want to be saints. www.wuxiaspit.com. What he is most worried about is competitors who are naked for their interests. When it was time for dinner, Olaf told his father that he hoped that he would tell Champlain about New England's meaning and Vinland's decision after next spring. This might prompt Champlain to fall to Vinland. Then Olaf reminded Heir that he must keep in touch with the 2 colonies and keep abreast of their movements. As long as the Puritan leadership in New England is found to be unstable, he should lend a helping hand to Brest and others. After all, a Puritan-led New England is definitely better than a future governor who will lead criminals, politicians, and careerists. Olaf once again reiterated his opinion. He believes that Vinland is now unified in the hands of Heir, with more than 100,000 square kilometers of land and inexhaustible resources, more than 10,000 people and thousands of potential people scattered everywhere. Savage slaves, and rich in land and population resources. It can be said that the basic board of Herat City has been established. Now there is no need to expand abroad, but to consider digesting Vinland. We must use the population resources in our hands to realize the realization of Vinland as soon as possible, develop Vinland, and then build Vinland into grain and grass base, industrial base, shipbuilding base, etc. It takes time to digest Vinland. During this period of time, it is necessary to have a good relationship with neighbors without interference from external forces. Therefore, it is necessary to maintain the balance in North America. New France, New England and Vinland form a triangular relationship. Vinland should have a relationship with Vinland. Mediation between the 2 sides ensures the stability of the situation, rather than participating in or launching a war. Heir, Olav, Hagrid, and Hudic were all very encouraged. They had never been in power, and they had never seen a model for the development of civilian production. After hearing Olaf's plan, Heir made a decision on the spot. Agree, and everyone happily drank 2 more glasses of wine. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96, Do You Want to Go Home? Heir and others just had to play cards at night, so Olaf went back to the room to rest. Olaf, who returned to the room, lit a candle made of animal fat, and then under the faint light he watched the 3 handwritten notes he had handwritten over the years, which contained various knowledge, culture and information about the current era. He had thought of over the years relevant information and historical knowledge. After a while the door was pushed open. Piku walked in with a pot of hot water and said, "Master, the foot wash is here, so let's bubble." In this era of backward productivity, Olaf's environment is sparsely populated and culturally backward, so basically there is basically no entertainment except drinking and fighting naked between men and women. Olaf, in order to entertain his time and maintain his body, he added a habit after coming to Wenland, which is to soak his feet every day before going to bed. For about an hour after soaking his feet, Olaf will feel sweaty and steamy all over, and then go to bed will be very comfortable. Although Piku is now the paddlehead of Aden, he still lives by the wall of fire outside Olaf's house. Because Olaf is very good to him, Piku regards Olaf as a relative from his heart, and he still serves Olaf every day. Feet will not fall asleep until the foot washing water is taken away. Sometimes Olaf will chat with Piku when he's idle. Sometimes he talks about Iceland, sometimes learns some Inuit language, sometimes asks about Piku's simple and boring life, but more Olaf brags about some of his dreams, that is, some things from Olaf's previous life. Olaf pretended to only brag about Piku in his dreams. It is also regarded as listening to the sky. That day, Olaf soaked his feet and talked about the Daemon kingdom in the Far East. He thought of the disasters that would make the Chinese nation in the future, and remembered the Qing dynasty, which would have to be compensated for hundreds of years, and he was very upset. The reason for Raf's irritability is that he knew that Han Taoism would be extinct in 10 years, but he was helpless looking at Piku with a beard and a leather coat like a Mongolian nobleman. Olaf smiled and said, "Aren't you only 21 years old this year? It's like that when you have a long beard and say that you are 30. Piku turned his head and said with a smile, "It's cold, and the hair is longer and the beard is still warm. If the master doesn't like it, I will cut it tomorrow." Olaf hurriedly waved his hand and said, "No need. I just asked casually. Your honor is actually quite mighty." "Really?" Piku smiled. "Actually, my dad and my brothers are just mighty." Piku's tone became lower while talking. Olaf noticed Piku's emotions and asked, "You miss home?" "I don't want to." Piku shook his head and said, "I can't eat enough in Greenland all day, and I live a good life with a young master. My Abar and elder brother are both whaling warriors. I don't worry about them, just my grandma, she loves me the most. She still has a cough. The patriarch said she is dying. I think she may be dead." Listening to Piku plainly telling that Olaf's body was a little cold, he lifted his feet from the basin to dry, and he hesitantly asked, "Do you want to go home and have a look?" Piku did not speak or move. Olaf knew that he must want to go, but he was just a slave of the young master. Even if he was the head of the Orin name, he was not qualified to mobilize the ship to Greenland. It didn't make sense to say it or not. Olaf felt a little bit stuck in his heart. He wanted to help Piku, but he was not the leader of Vinland after all, and he had no right to let the ship send Piku. Even if an armed merchant ship belonged to Olaf, it was only Olaf to improve himself. A tool of status and value, the actual right to use the ship is still under the control of heir. Without the support of Olaf's armed merchant ships and funds, he would want to control 2 Adings at a young age. Few people agree, and there will be a lot of Icelanders. People came out to comment, but because Olaf had earned an armed merchant ship and dozens of private white slaves at a young age, he had handed over these things to heir, and this kind of contribution was enough to stop the crowd. Olaf has no right and no reason to let the ship take Piku home, but he really wants to help the Inuit who is loyal and honest to him. Of course, Olaf likes Piku for some reasons. Because Piku has an oriental face, especially after he has his beard, he looks a bit like the teacher Teng who sings Steel Wings, which makes Olaf look very kind and relaxed, and can't help thinking Church Piccolo sings Invisible Wings. Since Olaf wanted to help Piku conquer Greenland, he wondered if he could mobilize his father and send ships and soldiers to Greenland to engage in colonization. But now is the Little Ice Age, and the whole world is getting colder. The temperature in Greenland is much colder than it was hundreds of years ago. This has led to the extinction of the original Viking colonists for more than 100 years. It is estimated that the entire 2.6 million square kilometers of Greenland, there are only 10,000 or 20,000 Inuit people struggling in the cold. Greenland's climate cannot develop planting. Only moss and a small amount of shrubs can only develop grazing and aquaculture. However, ordinary cattle and horses cannot adapt to the cold of Greenland during the current Little Ice Age, and are not as good as the original colonists and will not be completely destroyed. There is no way to develop firewood for breeding and lack of heating. Greenland is indeed worthless at the moment. It is no wonder the King Christian IV of Denmark established the Greenland Company a long time ago, but was unable to form a colony in Greenland until his death. However, after thinking hard, Olaf thought of an animal, that is, the Greenland reindeer. Before 1950, Greenland had tens of thousands of reindeer, but it was quickly slaughtered and extinct by the Danish colonists, and new ones were introduced from elsewhere. Reindeer breeds ensure that there will be no reindeer in Greenland. I thought of Olaf the reindeer and thought of the Arctic muskox, which also lives in Greenland. This is also a huge number of social animals, And there are also large numbers of carnivores such as polar bears and Arctic wolves. The Inuit people on Greenland are limited by the backwardness of tools and the scarcity of manpower and cannot hunt reindeer and musk ox on a large scale, but the Vikings can. It's not that there are no agricultural resources in Greenland, but there are no planting resources, but there are still breeding resources. Unfortunately, no one can use the resources. Greenland has reindeer, muskox, and a large number of walruses, seals and other animals, as well as a large number of fish. Inuit people, rowing kayaks and holding bone weapons, are limited by backward production methods and tools. The degree of exploitation of resources and wildlife resources is equal to zero. However, in front of the Vikings you have advanced technology, tools, weapons, and ships. These resources can be greatly developed over time and become huge funds. After all, Wenland is very close to Greenland, although it can provide supply support and help. This is several times better than Denmark. www.uxiaspit.com. Olaf knows that among the new Vikings composed of Icelanders, Ireland, Scotland, and Beoducs, the Beoducs are proficient in hunting, and the Icelanders and other whites can also domesticate and graze. These huge numbers of musk ox and reindeer are valuable for and meat. Colonizing Greenland is definitely beneficial. Meat can support the lives of colonists, and fur is an expensive specialty. And if the local reindeer adapted to Greenland's climate and temperature are trained in stalking, Greenland may become a reindeer breeding base in the future, which can provide a continuous supply of meat and fur for the Vikings. In addition to these resources, Olaf also thought of the tens of thousands of Inuit people on Greenland. These people fought beasts to survive in such a harsh environment. They are all good warriors with strong temperaments. If you take these Inuit, the special people are drawn into their own reserve of soldiers, and even absorbed into the Viking thunder, which is a strengthening and growth for the entire Viking thunder. Greenland covers an area of 2.6 million square kilometers, of which more than 340,000 square kilometers are not covered by ice and snow. Although the area that is really suitable for animals to live is less than 300,000 square kilometers, this area alone is not small. England is less than 200,000 square kilometers, but Greenland is so large that it is limited by the environment and climate, and resources are really scarce. Even if the usable area of Greenland is the sum of Vinland and Iceland, it still needs to be used carefully. If used properly, all 300,000 square kilometers can be used as pastoral and hunting areas. As long as they can be developed properly with logistical support, the resources obtained can definitely support tens of thousands of regular troops. Olaf became more excited as he thought about it. He accidentally kicked the water basin with his feet, and laughed. "Piku, you must be able to go home. You must also go home." Chapter 97, Christmas. Because Olaf's thoughts about the colonization of Greenland had not been communicated with Hader, it was inevitable that the eventual failure made Piku unhappy. So Olaf did not explain. After Piku packed up the tub and the sewage and left, Olaf blew out the candles, then lay on the bed and perfected his thoughts, and finally fell asleep when he felt that there was nothing wrong, and planned to talk to his father Hader about colonizing Greenland the next day. Plan of it was dawn. After Olaf woke up, Piku opened the door and waited for him to wash with hot water. Then Olaf took Piku downstairs to the restaurant for breakfast. Catelyn knew that her husband and son had put in a lot of hard work and energy to run Vinland. So she prepared 3 meals every day. This morning it was brown bread, fried deer chops and hot milk, as well as black pepper and salt, honey-made cold beets, pickled radishes. Olaf has adapted to the Icelandic cuisine a long time ago. Although sometimes it feels unsatisfactory, but overall it is acceptable. When the family arrived in Key, they prayed before dinner, and then finished their breakfast in silence. Hader and Hagrid, Olaf, and Olaf sat on the sofa in front of the fireplace to rest. Piku stood by and waited, and Catelyn went. After washing the tableware, Half and Jelly went down to the room at Catelyn's supervision after eating. Although the sofa was invented in the early 17th century, Olaf almost never saw it when he was in Iceland. He really saw it in Amsterdam. However, because of the raw materials, the sofa is still very rudimentary, and the style is very primitive and simple. The sofas in Hader Castle are all made of white wolf and reindeer leather before the Scottish and Irish white slaves. Inside are seabird feathers, leaves, wool, etc., and they are also very soft and warm when sitting. Olaf looked at Hader, Hagrid and Olaf, and seemed to want to play cards or go bang again. He hurriedly said his thoughts last night. The three of Hader fell into deep thought when they heard the words. Then Hagrid looked at Piku and asked, "How many Christmas are there in Greenland?" Piku looked confused. During his 20-year career in Greenland, he had only been to a few neighboring villages, and he had met fewer than 100 people. so he couldn't answer Hagrid at all. Olaf saw Piku's embarrassment and said, "Piku doesn't know, but I guess the population is definitely more than that of Vinland. These people are the best hunters and soldiers. There are countless reindeer, muskox. We only need to conquer the Akismo on Greenland to bring Greenland into our hands." Heir, Hagrid, and Olaf are very excited. In the past, few people went to colonize Greenland, and they were not organized. Limited by their vision and ability, they could not carry out large-scale colonial rule. But now Heir has a Vinland as backing up. It is very possible to send warriors to colonize Greenland. Olaf thought of something that Jot had said a few days ago, so he said, "Dad, Uncle Jot said before that most of the Beothuk slaves in the city of Herud are obedient to work, but the White Wolves." The samurai said that he was a noble samurai, he only wanted to fight and hunt, and was unwilling to carry out agricultural planting, logging, and quarrying. At that time, Uncle Jot also explained that the year was warm and he would train these people. I think these hundreds of White Wolf warriors are indeed very brave and good at fighting. It is really a waste to treat as coolies, but we have unified Vinland and there will be no war in a short time. It is better to let them go to Greenland to help us conquer love. Kismo. Urif, your idea is very good. Jot has complained to me several times. Now the labor force in Growth City is enough. It is really a way to throw these restless White Wolf warriors to Greenland. Doll's eyes lit up and smiled. After discussion, Heir finally decided to let Piku take his add in population and more than 500 White Wolf warriors from Herat City to colonize Greenland, so that more than 700 people can be gathered together and wear plate armor, spears and matchlocks, enough to sweep Greenland. After all, the island of Vinland has just been unified now. As long as thousands of acres of land are reclaimed next spring, it will be able to feed the tens of thousands of people in Herat. The third phase of construction can be launched. It is also a good choice to take the White Wolf warriors who are unwilling to do hard work to Greenland to slowly colonize Greenland, to conquer the Akismus and to domesticate and graze the reindeer and musk ox. It may be a good choice within a few years. Can get tens of thousands of Akismo warriors, and at the same time harvest a lot of fur and meat. After deciding on this matter, Heir appointed Piku as governor of Greenland to be responsible for all matters concerning the conquest of colonial Greenland. After next spring, Piku, who was entrusted with a heavy responsibility, was moved, crying, and knelt down and kissed the insteps of Heir and Olaf, and then promised to completely conquer Greenland within 5 years and lead all Akismus to welcome Heir's master. Of review, time always passes quickly in the cold winter, because people live at home and chat. December will soon pass. Today is December 25th. Today is the biggest holiday for Protestants and Catholics. Christmas. Christmas is a holiday created by believers to commemorate the birth of Jesus, the true Holy Son of the Trinity. Since the Bible does not record when was born, in ancient times, the day of Roman mythology to commemorate the god of Saturn was used as Christmas Day. Then Christmas came now as the beginning of the 17th century. Christmas is not a festival with a certain entertainment and consumption color of the later generations. Now Christmas Day is simply a festival of attending activities in the church and then praying, eating some pancakes and drinking a glass of wine. Vinland does not have a church. All Icelanders and other white people prayed and drank a glass of wine in their homes. Now that the white slaves in Vinland have become Vikings, Heir also gave each of them a pot of wine. Let the wine made this summer have, and the rest will not be enough to be sold in Europe next spring. The family in Hatterberg also prayed and ate pancakes and drank a glass of wine on this day. Everyone stopped entertainment on this day. www.wuxiaspit.com and thought about the past year, especially Heir. As the Lord of Wenland, the fate of tens of thousands of people is tied to him. He has never returned to the easy life that was a few years ago. He has to rack his brains every day to think about how to do it. To develop Vinland. How to develop production and dispatch the merchant marines to sell specialties in Europe after the coming spring of next year, and at the same time have a good relationship with New England and New France. This makes him painful and feels extraordinary happiness. Olaf was an atheist in his previous life, and he doesn't believe in Jehovah very much in his heart in this life, but for the future of himself and his family. Olaf also prayed for God's blessing when praying. Waiting for another 5 days is the new year. Olaf can't celebrate the Lunar New Year, let alone calculate, so he regards the New Year's Day in the Julian calendar as the spring festival in his heart, and then hopes for the coming next year. He knows if it goes well, next year, the city of Herat will rely on the furs obtained from many savage tribes and hunted furs and other specialties in exchange for wealth far beyond this year in Europa. and then the wealth will be transformed into the foundation of Vinland. These things are naturally gratifying, but Olaf is mainly thinking about the business of the Bank of Amsterdam. If the science and technology books of Daming that he agreed to buy with QIE last year can be obtained smoothly, then the foundation of Wendland agriculture and handicraft will be stable. Even if the mineral channels and skilled workers are improved in the future, heavy industry will have guidance books on basic technologies. Olaf feels that if he remembers correctly, the first industrial revolution that will make the Western world take off for the first time more than 100 years later is based on receiving the help of Eastern science books such as Shai and Gung Kwu, at least the bellows. Existence enhances the basis of industrial evolution, the output and quality of steel. Chapter 98, Spring Flowers Bloom. The New Year's Day of 1629 is coming soon, but entering January of 1629, the temperature in Wendland is still as cold as ever, and there is no sign of warming after entering January. There were 3 heavy snowfalls in Wendland. Until February, the 2-foot-thick snow and ice that covered Wendland for more than a month gradually melted, exposing the dark rocks and mud below. Wendland in February, although it was still utterly cold in the middle of the night, the temperature gradually returned to above zero after the sun came out at noon. Wait until mid-February, although the northern part of Wendland still preserved ice and snow in the dark, the temperature in the south was gradually warm and warm. The river had been civilized, and the river was flowing southward into the warm current of the Atlantic Ocean. Beginning in mid-February, the city of Heir began to go out under the leadership of the big and small leaders. Women, children, some men, and slaves stayed at home to clean up the debris and repair the sewage and drainage ditches. Vikings took warriors and men and most of their slaves scattered to the northern Avalon forest and the forests in the hinterland to hunt, increasing the stock of fur in the warehouse. The 1,000 Viking regiment was divided into 100 teams, each with 30 Beduc warrior slaves, and then scattered to various locations in Wendland for hunting, which swept the entire Wendland hunt for a time. Activities are in full swing. The governor of Buckens in Long Lake City, who is responsible for recruiting savages everywhere, also saw the hunting team that went deep into the vicinity within a few days, and then sent more than 500 warriors in his hand to participate in the hunt, and at the same time took a large amount of fur from the inventory. Come out, send a team of warriors to the city of Heir to pay tribute to the of Hader. The ocean surrounding Wendland's southeastern peninsula is affected by the Caribbean warm current. Although the latitude is high, it belongs to the non-freezing zone throughout the year. Therefore, finding a suitable location to establish a deep water port is definitely an inevitable choice for Wendland to develop to a certain extent. Hader, Hudic, and Hagrid were divided into 3 teams along the coastline looking for a suitable place to build a port in the future, especially near the transshipment corner. Starting this year, as the city of Heir has transferred the entire Vinland and realized the integration of the resources of 110,000 square kilometers of land, soon Vinland will become a powerful colony, and the construction of a port in the future is a must. So now we have to choose a location. A few days later, it was finally selected tens of thousands of steps southwest of the mouth of the Muskneu River, relying on a small peninsula in the east to build a wharf on both sides of the east and west at the same time, transforming it into a regular wharf. Olaf also went to see it in person. He thought it was pretty good, and it should be enough for Wendland in a few decades. But he remembered that the city of St. John in the northeast corner of the peninsula would be in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. In the future, you can find a location of the provincial capital of Wendland Island. It is definitely the most suitable place to build a deep water port on Vinland Island. A week later, after the city of Groot was renovated and cleaned up, Hader ordered all the Vikings staying in the city to lead slaves to find maple trees to collect maple sap, and then start another industry of refining maple syrup. At present, Wendland's 2 pillar industries are the fur export business produced by hunting beavers, white wolves, black bears, reindeer, seals, foxes, squirrels and other animal skins. This business is Wendland's current economic core. The second pillar industry is the sugar industry. Because of Wendland's special geographical location and climate, it is almost a fantasy to grow sugar cane to make sugar, but the creator is always kind. Maple syrup made from maple sap was named Queen Honey by Olaf. He made a lot of wealth in Europa and his party last year. This allowed Hader and others to see the great prospects of Vinland's sugar industry. Looking at the maple trees that can be seen everywhere on Vinland Island, Hader estimates that there are about tens of thousands of sugar-producing maple trees on Vinland Island. If they are used, they can produce half the sugar exports of Spain's Caribbean colony. The syrup is definitely the second pillar industry comparable to the fur industry. The leaders of these 2 pillar industries, such as Hader, paid the most attention. Hader also divided the region so that each leader led the slaves to pay close attention to the production, and stipulated a certain amount of ration for each leader and Viking. There is no question about whether you choose to sell it or use it for yourself. In the plan of the high-level inherit city, after the two-pillar industries, there are three emerging industries, namely fishery, plantation, and grazing. Keeping a world-class fishing ground and not doing anything is definitely not enough. You still need to develop the shipbuilding industry and make use of the fishing resources. There is also the cultivation and breeding industry. According to the climate, the land of 110,000 square kilometers should be used for agriculture in the south. Planting, growing food, potatoes, etc., in the future can be used as export products in exchange for money. In the colder northern regions, cattle, sheep, horses and reindeer can be farmed and developed. In the future, it will also be the production area of wool, cowhide, deerskin and other products. However, the planting industry and the breeding industry will have to wait a year or two to see if it is feasible. Therefore, the development center of Hader this year is still the two-pillar industries. Olaf led the two Aden, Piku, and Yaluji. A total of more than 400 people wandered around the peninsula all day, looking for maple trees to extract juice and make sugar. What Hader implemented in Vinland was the Viking Raiden system of slavery, patriarchal system, and legionary system. Because the core population is small and the rulers are all primitive indigenous people, this system is very convenient at present in various industries such as planting, hunting, and sugar picking. Hader shared the harvest ratio with his pastor chief Hagrid. Hagrid and his two Manjuf and Rudder heads, then Rudderhead and Adam the Oar heads are allocated, and finally the production team leader and the Vikings are allocated. The current distribution ratio is that 30% of the harvest is turned over to the city of Harut. The remaining 70% of the harvest, Leadang General Hader gets 10%. And Pastor gets the remaining www man. The Juf and Rudderhead gets the remaining 4%, Adden Propellerhead gets 3%, and the production team leader gets 2%. After this level of distribution, each Viking can guarantee 45% of the wealth created by himself and his slaves. Living in other European countries will inevitably have to pay a lot of taxes. If it is a tenant who farms for the landlord, the income will be less, so in comparison, the Vikings have gained a lot. After all, the slave income in their hands is also equal to their income. As long as a slave gets 50% more, he will not pay taxes. Viking Leadang is a system transformed from the ancient Viking expedition, robbery, colonization, so the top-down distribution model is similar to the ancient Viking spoils-sharing convention, but unlike the current taxation model, it is easier. Let the people accept it. Olaf thought about it, although it seems that the gains are similar, but Viking Lay should be a collective partner to start a business, and then distribute the stolen goods and gains. The conventional landlord and lord are exploited. Now the good life of the Vikings collectively based on the tragic fate of the looted and slaves, the Vikings naturally supported a system. Olaf knows very well that the current Viking Thunder is an emerging team of collective entrepreneurship. Before corruption, it will have strong cohesion and combat effectiveness. Just like the Haugenbaki at the same latitude and the same period in the Far East, it will be in a few years later. Under the leadership of Wang Taiji, it was changed to Manchuria, which was the period of rapid ascent from Manchuria on Baki Road compared with Manchuria. Olaf thinks that Viking Leadang may also have a rising period of about 20 or even 30 years. He glanced at the sun in the sky and felt the sunshine on his face, making people feel the faint warmth. Olaf sighed and murmured in a low voice, "The warmth of spring is about to bloom, and I hope Viking Leadang will do the same. Flourish like flowers and trees." Chapter 99, Leading and Number 039. S first expedition to sea. After half a month of busy work, the city of Harut ushered in the true spring of Vinland in 1629. Seabirds are flying in the sky, and the trees are sending out green shoots. Standing in the shade of the trees, you can observe the ponds and the trees everywhere, with small animals such as beavers and squirrels cautiously foraging for food when hunting. The Vikings used weapons such as bows, arrows, and muskets to deal with reindeer and white wolves. To catch small animals such as beavers and beavers, they use traps and traps. However, because Vinland Island is rich in resources, there are a large number of species. Even though they have been overhunting for many years, some small beasts can still be seen in the wild. By careful observation, the area of Vinland is too large. In fact, the only areas that are actually developed by humans are Harut City, Great Falls, and Vakens Long Lake. The rest of the mountains and forests are still dominated by various animals entering March, People with high nautical skills such as Heir, Hagrid, Hudic, etc. have felt that the Caribbean warm current has become active as the temperature warms up, and the warm wind blowing from the southwest has become more and more obvious. Many years of experience tell them that the day to set sail has arrived. After the first Viking Raiden leadership meeting in 1629, Heir could not elect to appoint Piku and provided him with enough food. He ordered 3 armed merchant ships to carry supplies in and addings. The Vikings and more than 500 White Wolf warriors went to colonize Greenland. Since Greenland lacks trees, it is equivalent to lack of wood, so Inuit people live in igloos or caves on glaciers. Heir knew that wood is a consumable in Greenland, so Piku was allowed to carry enough to build in Greenland. Room living wood, so Piku began to lead more than 100 Akismas and more than 400 White Wolf warriors after accepting the appointment to prepare for the expedition, such as collecting various items that may be used and carrying food at the same time, wood, etc. 3 days later, everything was properly prepared. Adam of more than 100 people under Piku's administration moved into a boat with his family and his mouth. In addition to their belongings and slaves, he also carried 3 white Vikings who were good at breeding. These 3 are farmers in the Irish landlord ranch. They have grown up on the ranch. They are best at the domestication and stocking of animals, and they can also deal with some animal diseases. They are indispensable talents for the development of agriculture after the colonization of Greenland. This ship carried more than 200 people, plus the stuff was almost full. The other 2 ships were loaded with goods such as timber, food, and more than 500 White Wolf warriors who were still slaves. They were all slaves of Heir and Hagrid, but the management authority was temporarily granted to Piku. If they can successfully conquer all the Aboriginal people of Greenland, Heir promised them that those with outstanding merits will be rewarded with encouragement, that is, to become the highest-ranking Viking and become a subject under the management of General Heir Raidang, and no longer a slave. After the 3 armed merchant ships left the bay in the south of Grote, Heir continued to lead the tens of thousands of people in the city to hunt and brew maple syrup. At the same time, the Thor's Hammer, Hope, and Hanse clippers also began to travel in Vinland. Cod is caught in the Eastern Sea to make dried fish. The movement of reproductive and industrial development is still being carried out inside and outside Vinland Island. Under the leadership of the 3 captains of Hilter, Bjorn and Polly, 3 armed merchant ships have left the waters near Vinland Island and started to go to Greenland in the north. The island is close. A few days later, the 3 ships arrived on the south coast of Greenland and stopped temporarily. Northern Greenland belongs to the coldest uninhabited land. Even the hardest Inuit people live in the central and southern regions. Only a few 100 kilometers or 100 kilometers around the coast can live in this vast land for humans and animals, and further down is the glacier Piku, who lives on the east coast of Greenland. However, due to the cold current of the Arctic Ocean, the temperature on the east coast is higher than that on the west coast. There are also many ice floes on the east coast, which is not conducive to the navigation of ships. When the Vikings colonized Greenland, their stronghold was also established at the southern end. It is currently mid-March. From the north of Vinland to the north, it is still a severe winter below zero. The floating ice that can be seen everywhere on the east coast has not melted, so ships cannot pass, and the Inuit people on the east coast are far away. It is less than the west coast, which is obviously not a good place to build a stronghold. The night before Olaf's trip to Piku, the master and servant had a chat indoors in the middle of the night. Olaf knew that Piku was good at learning and was very brave and sincere. He was a rare and good helper, and he was not willing to let him leaving, but in order for Greenland to be included in Vinland's scope, Olaf can only do his best to guide Piku. Olaf didn't know much about Greenland in his previous life. He only knew that it was a free state that was clamoring for the founding of a nation. It also had a lot of resources, but it was not something that could be developed now. Olaf knew that Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, was in the south of the west coast. Since the Danes chose to establish a colony there 200 years later, and became the capital in later generations, it shows that Nuuk is definitely the most suitable place to establish a colony. Piku firmly remembered the many words the owner told him that night, and on the second day after arriving in Greenland, he set off again northward, preparing to find a place called Nuuk. Nuuk is an Inuit language promontory. Piku looks east from the deck every day, hoping to see a huge promontory at noon the next day. Piku finally saw a huge headland appearing on the northeast coast, and a huge strait appeared on the south side of the headland. When the ship approached Piccolo, I realized that this was not a promontory, but a huge island, which stood high above the sea and had a vast area from the south of the island to the east. You can see several promontories protruding. It is very suitable for the passage of boats and boats, and it is also easy to stop depending on the terrain. Piku thought for a moment and thought that this might be Nuke, so he ordered the boats. Lean in more than an hour later, the three big ships found a natural harbor with a concave shape that was very suitable for docking after the ship docked. Piku stood on the ship and could see a dozen or 20 tents made of whale skin and whale bones on a hillside in the distance. They were swollen like women's. The estimated distance is 4,000 or 5,000 steps away, maybe further. Seeing the whale tent, Piku knew that this must be the territory of a big tribe, because the big shaman leaders who can live in the whale skin tent, women and children don't get off the boat. 500 white wolf warriors and Viking men will disembark with me. Everyone put on leather armor, plate armor, and weapons. Let's first conquer the Akismo tribe nearby, and then tonight you can live in a warm wall-skin tent. Piccolo laughed and yelled loudly to stop the Akismo women on the boat to pack their belongings and follow the men to disembark, and then gave the first command to arrive in Greenland. More than 500 white wolf warriors dressed in white wolf leather jackets given by Heir, and armed with sharp iron tools such as swords and spears, assembled on the shore. 50 Akismo warriors also put on the full-body plate armor brought from the ship, and then stood beside the white wolf warrior with their spears. You reading www.can't.com. Piku and the three captains of Hilter, Bjorn, and Polly also put on plate armor, and then each carried a matchlock with a short spear and a large axe between their waists. Heir did not give Piku a musket for this expedition to Greenland, but only gave him plate armor, leather armor, spears, long swords and other weapons and equipment. Now Piku's arquebus was personally gifted by Olaf for his body protection. The hilts muskets were obviously also weapons rewarded by Heir. Although the hilts were only the captains who sent Piku to Greenland, there was no difference in the status of the two parties, and the three did not need to help Piku in the war, but not to say that Piku was Heir's private slaves, just for the sake of the trio of Viking raids expedition victory and the interests of Growth City will not stand by. Piku also knew that the three white men of his own age were all the confidants of Heir and Hudic. They also showed humility in getting along with them for many days. As the team was assembled, Piku invited Za. The three people of Urt gave the order, and the three of Hilt also knew that the leader and governor of the expedition to conquer Greenland was Piku, so they all declined and said they would obey the arrangement. Piku was no longer polite, pointing to the hillside in the distance, and said, "On that hillside is an Akismo tribe with a population of no more than 50 people, but it does not rule out the possibility of close to 100 people. So please be more vigilant. Before they react, everyone marches quickly. When they get closer, the Viking soldiers will attack from the front and the White Wolf warriors attack from the side." Piku has studied the formations and tactical command of Heir, Hagrid, and Hudic. Now that he has learned how to do so, and his orderly manner, the three people of Hilt are a little convinced. They feel that General Heir sent Pippi. Koku's arrival seemed to be a deliberate decision. Chapter 100, Go to Europa. It was already early April when the three of Hilter returned to Winland from Greenland by boat. The temperature in Growth City is getting warmer and warmer. The Vikings led the slaves who were reclaiming land outside the city and planting sweet potatoes, rye, barley and other crops. These are hardy grains and crops with good yields. Plant these crops and wait until the end of this autumn is the harvest time. There are currently 1,000 acres of land outside the city of Growth. Ayat, who is responsible for agricultural planting, plans to cultivate 4,000 acres of land during the prime time of spring plowing, and then half of it will plant rye and other grains, and half will plant potatoes and sweet potatoes in order to better manage the cultivated land. This year, the city of Heir will also establish several village fortress-like strongholds between the cultivated land, not only to protect food from being ruined by animals, but also to facilitate management, because with the increase of land, it would be too wasteful of energy and time to travel to and from Heir every day on foot. It would be better to build small farm castles outside the city to allow Vikings and some slaves to take turns to live when they are farming and serve the crops in the land. This decision was put forward by Yacht after careful consideration and was directly implemented. Now 10 strongholds have been selected outside the city, and 10 addings are responsible for them, and the remaining 8 addings are responsible for the arable land in and around the city. Kiku took the people to Greenland, and there are only 18 addings in the city of Heir. The three Hilts returned to Growth with a box of walrus tusks and a huge whale bone, 100 seal skins and 3 polar bear skins. These gifts were all Piku and the three led the Vikings. The men and the White Wolf warriors conquered the gains in the Akismo tribe, and then presented most of the spoils to Heir and dedicated them to the Lord of Vinland, The Viking raid general Hader encouraged the 3 captains, and then gave them 10 slaves each, and then waved their hands and moved the items into the warehouse. At this time, Olaf, who got the news, also rushed back to the castle. Hagrid, Kadir, Heine, Olav and others also rushed there. Hader knew that they were all concerned about the success of Piku's colonization in Greenland. Let Polly and Bjorn talk about the situation. Hilter was a bit stuttering, so he could only smile and watch the 2 partners beside him telling the thrilling journey of the Greenland party. 12 days ago we first went to rest on an island in the southern tip of Greenland, and then, when we arrived in Nuuk, we conquered an 80-member Akismo tribe without repairing it. I heard Piku said that this is a large tribe, because Greenland's Akismo people are generally a dozen people living as a unit. After conquering them, we let these people become slaves and then ordered them to help carry goods, build camps, and then build a simple camp with wood 3 days later, and then conquer the surrounding 8 tribes, finally increasing the number of more than 300 people. Slaves, but there was also a white wolf warrior who was shot in the sole of the foot by the Akismo warrior. These slaves were given to the white wolf warrior by Piku. We saw that the camp had been established, so we came back with gifts. After listening to Polly and Bjorn, everyone knew that Piku's conquest of the Akismo went smoothly. This is as they thought. After all, the Akismo itself is not an opponent of the White Wolf warrior. With the help of advanced weapons and Viking soldiers, it is only normal to conquer more than 300 people with only 1 wounded. It is estimated that this year Piku will be able to conquer the southern west coast, with Nuuk as the center. This year, they have just stood up and it is difficult to guarantee a substantial increase in rations. We have to support more and wait until the fleet returns from Europe to Greenland. Send a batch of grain and wood. Hader rubbed his palms and smiled. After talking about Hader, he called the other heads of the oars. At the meeting, it was decided that the fleet will go to Europa to buy and sell goods at the end of the month. Since Vinland has just been unified, mass production and life are things that need to be resolved. There are also New England and New France. To deal with the diplomatic relations of this colony, Hader, Jod and Hanna were somewhat difficult to resist, so this year, Olaf and Hudik will stay and help Hader manage Vinland, and the matters of going to Europe will be left to Hagrid, Olav and Bjorn, Polly, Hilter and others. Olaf knew that he was still too young. Even if he went to Europe, he couldn't change anything. It would be better to do some explorations with 2 Vikings and slaves from Adding and Wenelin, and he might achieve something. Last year, a group of Hudik, Hager, Olav, Olaf and others went to Europe to sell fur and queen honey and other goods, and brought back 4 ships and many weapons, equipment and supplies. This year's fur and queen honey are 20% of last year. Times and 30 times, Hader told Hagrid and Olav that he only needed to bring back 10 armed warships and enough weapons to equip 1,000 Viking soldiers this year. What Hader planned was that all the capable soldiers of Viking Thunder would have arquebus, plate armor and other equipment. Hader felt that there were no more weapons and equipment. After all, there were 2 restless neighbors around him in addition to weapons and ships. Hader also asked Hager to pay more attention to craftsmen and technicians, especially experts in shipbuilders and mineral exploration and mining. In the future, Wenland must find its own shipbuilding industry and mineral-seeking development industry, otherwise the purchase of ships, weapons and equipment and ironware will consume most of the income. Hader promised Hagrid that as long as he met the right craftsman, he would invite him to the city of Herat no matter how high he was paid. This was related to Wenland's development and the future of the country. Hader's knowledge was actually the result of Olaf's brainwashing for him. At the beginning, Hader did not intend to develop industry in Vinland, at most developing some handicraft industries, but Olaf knew that countries without an industrial foundation were simply being ravaged. When the 30 Years' War is over, Britain and France will take off quickly thanks to the backfeeding of overseas colonies, and Sweden, the Netherlands, and Denmark will continue to make progress. If this small island located on the east coast of North America does not advance a step, it will be contended and occupied by Britain and France in the future. In the future, not to mention the founding of the country and the counterattack in Europe. Even the life of this small island can be kept. Olaf's in-depth explanation for Hader explained that industry is equal to productivity, equal to military foundation, and equal to national strength. It made Hader realize that Vinland wants to develop and wants to have a place in the current world of great controversy. He can only develop the shipbuilding industry, and heavy industries such as mining and iron smelting cannot even protect themselves without this. www.wuxiaspet.com let alone expansion. The 6 large ships were quickly loaded with 3 cargoes: leather goods, dried fish, And Queen Honey, don't embarrass us Icelanders when you go to Europe. If you encounter someone who dares to take a look at our belongings, we will teach him severely." Heir was very nervous about the 6 cargoes, and ordered Hagrid and Olaf before leaving. "Don't worry, brother, my Hagrid's axe is not for chopping wood." Hagrid laughed and patted the axe on his waist, making a clumsy sound. "Father, don't worry, we have more than 100 Viking warriors this time. Even the slaughter of a duck is enough. I think we are the only ones who provoke others, and no one dares to provoke us." Olaf smiled heartily after chatting for a few words. Hagrid, Olaf and others began to inspect the goods, and then hugged and said goodbye to Heir and others, and then boarded and left with 120 sailors and 20 Viking soldiers on April 9, 1629. The city of Winlanrod, which had been preparing for a year, collected hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of silver with all the power of the island. Then the fleet, under the leadership of Hagrid and Olaf, with the ardent expectations and blessings of tens of thousands of people including Heir, he left the transshipment corner, hung sails along the wind that later generations named the Mexican warm current, and soon disappeared on the sea. This year's fleet left 20 days earlier than last year, and there are currently no British or French fishing boats in the waters southeast of Vinland, but according to the estimates of several old servants who followed Hagrid in Vinland for 9 years, Heir and Olaf both knew that in about 10 days, British and French fishing boats would appear on the sea southeast of Vinland. Heir snorted coldly in his heart, looked at the expanse of the sea and gleamed in his eyes, muttering, "Wait, there will be no more ships from other countries in Wetlands waters." End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.